Chapter 864. Holding the dimensional observation power stripped from Caroline with both hands, Yi appeared solemn and focused at this moment. Suddenly, the door in front of the door cracked open from the middle. The natural door opened. The moment the door was opened, Yi closed her eyes and didn't look at the content inside. A strong gust of air rushed out of the door, blowing Yuye's hair back and making her dress stick to her body. The source of power she held in her palms slowly floated out, facing the gust of wind, and slowly drifted into the door. The moment the source of power representing the dimensional observation power passed through the door closed with a heavy sound. The strong gust of air stopped, and Yi slowly opened her eyes. She didn't leave right away, but put her hands down with her palms facing herself. Then, she closed them in front of her chest and slightly bent her waist. This was like a special etiquette when one was taking their leave. Luocio suddenly stopped, sat upright and closed his eyes. Before this, he didn't do anything and just casually looked at Father Song's book collection. But his current appearance was a little strange, so much so that Gan Hong put down the comic book in her hand. Gan Hong hesitated and slowly walked in front of Luocio, looking at his motionless appearance. She tried to reach out and pat Luocio on the shoulder, but in the end, she withdrew this very impolite intention. "Master Chiu?" Gan Hong called softly. Luocio opened his eyes. "What's the matter?" "No." Gan Hong shook her head doubtfully. "Nothing. Do you need me to pour you some water?" "All right." Luocio smiled and stood up. He first put the book back on the bookshelf, then walked out of the reading room to the courtyard outside, seemingly intending to breathe in the fresh air. Gan Hong looked at Luocio strangely, but still lowered her head, carried the teapot, and walked away quickly from him, so she didn't hear Luocio talking to himself. Luocio looked at the sky outside the courtyard thoughtfully. Dimension observation. Is this one of the reasons we can obtain information about the future? Yuye's sacrifice was somewhat beyond his expectations. But because of this, Luocio knew that his vacation would be extended by a lot. There's nothing wrong with being a rich, ordinary person. Luocio smiled. I hope you can become rich in your heart, Miss Caroline. Luocio suddenly fetched some water from the side and watered the bonsai planted in the courtyard. He seemed to be in a good mood. You're quite leisurely. Song Ying's voice came from the corridor at the entrance. She quickly walked in front of Luocio. It seems that you're ready. Actually, I didn't prepare much. Luocio put down the sprinkler. You're the one who prepared more. I didn't do anything. Thank you for arranging an etiquette teacher for me. I really can't tell what's impeccable about it. Song Ying muttered under her breath. Nothing. Song Ying waved her hand. Since you're ready, let's go. We're going to the God of Gamblers' Vineyard now. The wine tasting is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We need to arrive early to show our sincerity. Luocio nodded and said, You can arrange it. Song Ying frowned. Can't you give some advice? I'm not your personal secretary. This time, Grandpa asked me to work with you. You should at least contribute a little. Luocio thought for a moment, then said with a serious face, Then I'll carry your bag later. I'm so angry. I really want to beat this guy up. Song Ying clenched her fists and suppressed the irritation in her heart with difficulty. Then, she clapped her hands heavily in front of Luocio. The sound was very loud. After Song Ying clapped her hands, a few young servants quickly came to the corridor. There were 3 men and 3 women, and they had a good temperament. The servants each held different things in their hands. After that, there was a very flirtatiously dressed Caucasian man in his 30s. The Caucasian man held a pair of scissors in his hands and many tools on his body. He looked like a hairdresser. Clothes, shoes, and socks. Luocio blinked, but he saw Song Ying waving her hand and ordering the servants, Change this Master Chiu's clothes. Change his hairstyle while you're at it. Yes, Miss Song. Several people said in unison. So, Luocio blinked and was pushed into the room by a group of people. Song Ying sighed heavily in the courtyard and rubbed her forehead. Miss Song Ying? Gan Hong came back with a teapot filled with water. When she saw Song Ying, she greeted her respectfully. She glanced at Luochio, who was being fiddled by the servants in the room, and roughly knew what had happened. At this time, Song Ying suddenly walked to Gan Hong and raised Gan Hong's collar, saying indifferently, "You also go change your clothes. I've prepared it for you in the room next door." "Thank you, Miss Song Ying." Gan Hong nodded. "Is there a need to be so polite?" Song Ying frowned. "I'll go change first." Gan Hong turned and left. "Wait!" Before she could finish her words, Song Ying watched Gan Hong disappear at the end of the corridor. Her phone suddenly rang. "I'm Song Ying. What do you want to say?" "What, that woman is here." Song Ying impatiently replied quickly, but then she heard the news from the other side of the phone. She instantly frowned. "Okay, I know. Keep an eye on her, keep an eye on her. You don't seem to be in a good condition. Did something bad happen?" Luochio's voice came from behind. Song Ying subconsciously turned around and said unhappily, "It's none of your business." In front of her, Luochio had changed into a brand new suit, and the hairstylist had used his superb skills to give Luochio a brand new hairstyle in a short time. Somehow, at this moment, Song Ying suddenly remembered the etiquette teacher's evaluation of him. Is there anything wrong?" Luochio looked at himself. He couldn't tell if it was good or bad. Usually, Yu Yi was the one who gave him his clothes. These days in this humble house, in fact, he just wore what he was comfortable with, and it was no different from when he was at home. It was just that the wax on his hair was a little too much. "It's okay, it's barely passable." Song Ying crossed her arms and raised her chin, saying, "It's SOSO." Then, Song Ying quickly turned and left. "Hurry up and leave after changing your clothes. The car is ready." At this time, Gan Hong had also changed her clothes and came in. She was wearing a pink-blue dress. Gan Hong squatted down, took a look, and left in a hurry. Gan Hong couldn't help but look at Luochio with doubts, but after seeing Master Chio's new clothes, she couldn't move her eyes away. Without a doubt, she was the one who had been with Luochio for the longest time in this humble house. In Gan Hong's understanding, this Master Chio couldn't be compared to those who could really be considered handsome in terms of appearance. But if you looked carefully, you would find that after one look, you would want to take a second look. If you took a second look, you couldn't help but take another look. Looking and looking, you would find that you didn't know when your eyes would ignore many things, leaving only this figure. "Actually, this suits you very well," Luochio praised. Gan Hong knew that this wasn't a compliment. After a few days of getting along, she already understood that Luochio was a person who didn't speak against his heart. Or rather, he was a person who spoke according to his heart. Other people's praise would more or less have some other meaning, perhaps even with a deliberate intention, but when he praised, it was just praise, praise for what he thought was good. Gan Hong smiled slightly, revealing her small canine teeth. "Thank you." Same city, airport. A Chinese flight had just arrived at the port in the first-class cabin. A young man in a casual suit glanced at the woman sitting next to him. His immediate superior, the third daughter of the Zhong family, Zhong Luoyue, who had a huge influence in China. Her family's roots were intertwined in all walks of life. His name was Ajay, and his master was Tushini, the god of gamblers. He was the last disciple of the god of gamblers. 5 years ago, he started to make a living in the underworld. Later on, people in the underworld gave him a nickname, Little God of Gamblers. More than a year ago, Ajay worked for Zhong Luoyue. After winning that important game, he stayed in Zhong Luoyun's Four Seasons group. There was no doubt that he liked the woman next to him, but he knew that no matter how successful he was at the gambling table, he would never be able to touch this woman. Les Miserables. Is this book good? Ajay looked at Zhong Luoyue's side profile. The weather in South America was not as good as in China, so Zhong Luoyue was wearing rather cool clothes. Hearing this, she closed the book in her hand and said calmly, "Nothing, It's just that one of my brothers likes to read this book, so I read it. Whether it's good or not depends on the person. Ajay shrugged. In addition to being a gambling master, he was also a playboy. I still think you look better, so I'm giving it to you. Ajay slowly opened his palm and folded a rose with the tissue he used to deliver food on the plane. Zhong Luoyue took it calmly. Thank you. We're here, let's get off the plane. As she spoke, she left her seat and casually inserted the rose into the glass. It was said that tissue was one of the most absorbent substances. In an instant, the paper rose melted in the cold water. Ajay was in a daze. After tidying up his clothes, he stood up. He looked out of the window and saw the endless tarmac. He used to live in this city. In fact, he would come back here every year during the new year to find Tushani and have a reunion dinner with him. Ajay was an orphan, and god of gamblers Tushani was not only his master, but also his family. He didn't know if it was right to bring Zhong Luoyue here. He just wanted his master to meet this woman. Is there anything else? At the exit, Zhong Luoyue stopped and turned around. Let's go. This is the Song family's territory. Don't stay too long at the airport. Ajay quickly followed up and said to Zhong Luoyue, Don't worry, my master won't do it again. Zhong Luoyue said, Nothing is absolute in this world, only things with probability. Ajay said, It doesn't matter. Even if Miss Song can really impress my master, I'll turn a good thing into a bad thing. Outsiders don't know my master's temperament. If you want to get close to my master and make him happy only based on some rumors, I'm afraid you'll make a fool of yourself. Let's go. Zhong Luoyue just nodded. She looked up at the sky. It was cloudy and hot. It's probably going to rain. It's normal to have a lot of rain on the beach. Ajay said casually. It's better to be cool. Zhong Luoyue walked out of the cabin door and quickly sat in the car parked outside the airport that had been prepared long ago. At this time, not long after the two black private cars drove out of the airport, a few more cars quickly approached them on the road. In these private cars there were all men in black. They all wore headphones in their ears and communicated with each other. The target is about to drive out of the highway intersection. Get ready to intercept. Missing said that we can't let them drive out of the suburb anyway. If we fail, we'll all get out. Got it. Got it. I don't have time to give you a gift. Therefore, not long after the two cars drove out of the airport past the toll booth and were about to drive into the city, the other cars that had been following behind them suddenly cut in between the two cars. They accelerated. It seems that they've found us. Hey, it's a piece of cake. In the streets and alleys, there was suddenly a speed chase. But many pedestrians were used to it. Some even took out their mobile phones and started to take pictures. Suddenly, a loud gunshot sounded in the street. The tires of a private car in front of them were shot out. Because it lost control, it crashed into the light post on the side of the road. The car behind it didn't brake in time and crashed into it at the moment. At this time, the cars behind quickly stopped, and a few men in black suits came out of the cars. They quickly came to the two crashed cars and looked through them. They quickly pulled out the people in the cars, but they didn't find the people they were looking for. A man in a black suit's face changed slightly. Oh no, we've been tricked. He kicked the wrecked car angrily and picked up the phone. I'm sorry, missing. We lost him. At this moment, a blue Porsche was driving quickly on the street paved with small bricks. The driver was Ajay. At this time, he tapped on his Bluetooth headset and quickly said to Zhong Luoyue next to him, "Third miss, your people have said goodbye. It doesn't matter as long as we can get there." Zhong Luoyue said indifferently, "Are you familiar with this place?" Ajay said, "I've been living here from the age of 13 to 19. Although the Song family is such an emperor, the emperor won't look for rats in the sewer. Don't worry, we'll only be early, not late." Okay. Zhong Luoyue slowly closed her eyes and began to rest. Chapter 865. There were a total of 79 demons hiding in this city. Of course, these demons were not completely pure. Some of them were actually the offspring of demons and humans. Just as heaven would accept devout believers, there would also be demons in hell who would tempt humans to fall. Charlotte had the command of the Queen of Hell, and Lucifer, who sat on one of the thrones of hell, naturally had a command over the demons. After taking over the White Hell Bar, Charlotte had ordered her subordinates to quickly dig out a rather large space under the bar. Late at night, when the brilliance of the stars and the moon ruled the dark side of the earth, Charlotte was standing in the center of this huge underground space. She held her crystal ball in both hands, and under her feet were circles made of strange characters. These lines looked like the lines of a very cool and complicated magic array in the eyes of others. At this time, the demons gathered outside the circle one by one walked to the outermost circle, cut their wrists or cut their chests, and poured their blood into the circle groove. Each demon offered at least half of their blood. This was the command given by Charlotte. Most of the life and power of a demon came from blood. A normal amount of blood was equivalent to harvesting almost half of their life. This was an unbearable loss for any demon. They did not know how long it would take to make up for this part of consumption, but there was no doubt that they had no way to resist Charlotte's command. After all, she was able to reach the secret chamber of the Queen of Hell, Lucifer, and come into contact with the power of the Throne of Pride, one of the 7 kings of hell. Although unwilling, the demons, or the descendants of demons, offered their blood in an orderly manner. Through this blood sacrifice, they could summon the power of the Throne of Hell, Pride. Charlotte wanted to borrow the power of the throne to strengthen her divination ability. She really felt that the two transcendents were not reliable at all. In fact, Charlotte was well aware of the nature of her divination. It was often the opposite of the result. Then, she would do it according to the opposite of the result of the divination. At worst, after this matter was over, she would kill all the demons who knew about it to protect her reputation. Deceiving myself? I'm a demon. More and more power began to flow into Charlotte's body through the blood sacrifice, becoming the source of power that supported her use of the ultimate divination technique. It's about time. Give me some more blood. If you're too slow, I'll feed you to the Cerberus. Charlotte didn't only have one Cerberus. In fact, she had another Cerberus called Xiao Xiao. No matter how weak he was, it was still better than becoming food for the Cerberus. Demons were creatures that knew how to weigh the pros and cons. While they were strong, they were also timid. Their treacherous and greedy nature contained cowardice. A female demon's face was pale. She endured the pain and cut her wrist again. As the descendant of a charm banshee, she had half-human blood in her. This kind of blood sacrifice was really going to cost her old life. Fortunately, she had been engaged in a modeling career and had a lot of male resources. At this time, the half-human half-demon was already thinking about how many guests she should find to make up for her consumption after the ceremony was over. The football player she met not long ago seemed to be not bad. He was not quietly handsome, and his body was very strong. He should be able to last for a while. Perhaps it was because of the charm banshee bloodline in her body, she suddenly felt a burning sensation coming from her body. Strange, why did it seem like she was suddenly cut in half? This half-human half-demon charm banshee didn't know that the separation of her vision was only because her body was suddenly cut in half. She didn't know why it was like this, because she was completely dead at this moment. The cut-up body seemed to be burned by something at this moment, emitting black smoke. In the blink of an eye, only a pile of ashes was left on the ground. The shocking change made the surrounding demons become ferocious. They dared to tear apart anyone who dared to break in. However, the demons' ferocity turned into fear after a few seconds. It was because they saw the most powerful enemy of their destiny, an angel from heaven. It wasn't an ordinary angel, but a superior angel, a seraph with 6 wings. Every feather on the seraph's wings contained holy power that was extremely uncomfortable for demons. Moreover, this was one of the top angels in the pyramid of the angel system. The left of God, the angel of death, Gabriel. This is the left of God. How could it appear here? Soon, some ancient demons recognized the origin of this angel, who was so beautiful that they couldn't distinguish its gender. Of course, the demons knew that angels were born without gender. It was just that they had lived in the human world for a long time and had long been used to categorizing such beauty as a female. Under normal circumstances, even if it was a male, if it was so beautiful, some lustful demons could do it. Even if it didn't have a reproductive system because it didn't have a gender, or even an excretory system because it didn't need to eat, it still had lips that could speak beautiful sounds. "I'll cleanse the sins here," Gabriel said simply. Although his father had asked him to find the fallen star of dawn in a monastery in the east, he couldn't ignore the gathering of so many demons before that. In fact, it wouldn't take much of his time to clean up the demons here. The massive holy light instantly illuminated the entire basement. Under the radiance of one of the angels who was closest to God, some of the weaker demons could not even hold on for more than 3 seconds before they were turned into billowing smoke, purified by the radiance of the holy light. The remaining demons were struggling to resist, and a few banshees let out sharp screams to release the fear in their hearts. God says that the filthy evil will disappear. Gabriel waved his hand, and a beam of holy light turned into a cross-shaped sword energy. Holding it in his hand, he casually cut open a demon's body and walked into the blood-stained circles as if he were strolling. At that moment, Charlotte, who was at the most critical moment of her ultimate divination, was anxious. She could only instruct the demons who were still able to resist the illumination of the holy light to pounce on the left of God. Nonsense. Whether it's the Bible or the handwritten history book, there's no such thing. Charlotte quickly complained. Don't talk nonsense every time you fight demons. You're so annoying. Noisy. Gabriel snorted coldly and waved the holy light cross sword in his hand. At this moment, Charlotte was drenched in cold sweat. She stared at her crystal ball with all her might. Vaguely, she could already get a little response from the crystal ball. Just a little bit more. However, Gabriel suddenly raised the holy light cross sword in his hand. Instantly, the holy light in the basement became more than 10 times stronger. Under the holy light that was as bright as the sun, the demons turned into ashes one after another. Only Charlotte was still holding on in pain. However, cracks appeared on Charlotte's pale skin. Her body looked like tempered glass that had been broken, and it was extremely frightening. A shrill scream rang out. Meanwhile, Gabriel, who was releasing the holy light to its heart's content, frowned. He snorted coldly and waved his hand, shooting out the holy light cross sword in his hand. After a while, when everything calmed down, only the embers of the demons' deaths remained on the ground. Gabriel looked around but couldn't find the female demon who was standing in the center with the crystal ball in her hand. The holy light cross sword that he had shot out had also disappeared. What a troublesome group of people. Gabriel waved his hand, and an invisible force erased the huge circles that Charlotte had drawn here to prevent humans from discovering them one day. He knew that humans were too good at learning and creating. Many centuries ago, some of the most intelligent humans had grasped the power that didn't belong to them from the remnants of the battle between angels and demons. Finally, they named it magic. After erasing the traces here, Gabriel quickly left this turbid place and headed east. Charlotte only felt her body rolling, as if she was rolling down the hill. When she raised her head and looked around, she found that it was dark all around, as if she was in an endless void. The place she was in was a small, bare mountain floating in this void world. She heard a faint sound and turned her head. The first thing she saw was a head of golden curly hair. She immediately recognized the owner of the golden curly hair. It was Wolfgang. Wolfgang, who had also fallen to the ground, struggled to get up. Charlotte saw a huge wound on Wolfgang's shoulder. It seemed like he had been pierced by something, and blood kept flowing out. "It's you!" Charlotte couldn't help but exclaim. Wolfgang's lips twitched and he pressed his hand on his shoulder with a painful expression. The left of God, as expected of one of the most powerful warriors in heaven. He's too terrifying. Such a simple attack. Miss Charlotte, are you all right? I think you have a bigger problem. Charlotte frowned and stood up. Why did you save me? Wolfgang's pain seemed to lessen, and he slowly stood up. Because I always hoped that His Highness Lucifer could become a part of our dimensional rift. Besides, I'm also very interested in the result of your divination, Miss Charlotte. You should have succeeded in getting some revelations, right? This is the dimensional rift. Charlotte frowned and looked around. Wolfgang said, It's not a real rift. At best, it's the peripheral area, which is the buffer zone for us to travel to and from the main world. But as you can see, this place is barren, and there are no traces of life. The concept of time is also very vague here. Charlotte nodded. She opened her palm and looked at her crystal ball. Just as Wolfgang had said, she had persevered until the end and had almost perished. In the end, her efforts had not been in vain. She had indeed obtained the results of the divination. The fool disappeared where the sun rises, Charlotte said softly. Where the sun rises? Wolfgang muttered. That means His Highness Lucifer is in the east. That's the direction we should look for? Unexpectedly, Charlotte said, No, we should look for the west. Why the west? Isn't this the opposite of what the divination said? Wolfgang asked in surprise. Just trust me, Charlotte said coldly. Wolfgang shrugged. He had his own plan. Noah's identity was somewhat special among the Transcendents. This time, he secretly invited Noah without telling many people, but he did not expect Noah to be directly taken away by heaven. He had not told this matter to the Transcendents in the Dimension Rift Paradise Lost. He did not want to go back like this, at least. He wanted to see if he could persuade Lucifer. Okay, Miss Charlotte. Wolfgang nodded and smiled. I think you won't refuse to go with me now, right? Okay, but can you take off your wig? And get rid of your white silk as well? Charlotte said coldly. This why? Disgusting. In all honesty, in their era, this was the trend. After the MPV drove out of the city, it entered a field. After leaving the modern city, they could see more primitive buildings. After all, this was a city with a history of hundreds of years, and it deliberately preserved the culture of the old era. Some fields could already be seen. It was the harvest season. Luocio looked at the machine harvesting grapes with interest, but Song Ying's gaze drifted to Luocio. Is there something on my face? Luocio turned his head and looked at Song Ying curiously. I'm looking at the weather, not at you. Don't be narcissistic. Song Ying snorted lightly, then crossed her left leg over her right leg and looked at the other side of the window. The MPV was spacious enough to give the passengers enough space, but even so, Song Ying still opened the window, saying that she wanted to get some air. You seem to be in a hurry. What's the matter? Luocio also lowered the window on his side. Song Ying casually said, Nothing, just that a particularly annoying guy is coming. Maybe we can see him later. This time, the wine tasting of the god of gamblers, Tushini, might not go so smoothly. A particularly annoying guy? Luocio thought. But Song Ying seemed to have thought of something at this time. She suddenly looked at Luocio, sizing him up. Suddenly, Song Ying propped herself up and put her hands on Luocio's shoulders. I don't need you to carry my bag. Luocio blinked. Song Ying suddenly squinted her eyes and smiled. I'll introduce you to a top beauty. Looking at Luocio's confused look, Song Ying secretly laughed at this time. Zhong Luoyue, I don't know if you can do anything to this person? Chapter 866. In the photo, one could clearly see that it was a man, but because he was wearing a white half-mask, it was difficult to determine his age. This is the god of gamblers, Tushini. In the MPV, Song Ying used her finger to swipe the pad in front of her. There were only 3 photos in total. Tushini won't resist being photographed because no one knows what he looks like. Of course, there are people who use technology to deduce his original facial contours based on the lines of the mask and restore his appearance. But reality has proven that this is not feasible. People still can't find his true face. If you don't see people with their true faces. Luocio looked back and forth at the photos on the pad and asked curiously, "Then how did your people find him here?" Song Ying crossed her arms and said, "In addition to his amazing gambling skills, Tushini is also a wine master. 20 years ago, Tushini brewed a batch of wine called the Daylily series. There are a total of 7 bottles. 3 of them were sold at a high price at an auction in London. As for the remaining 4, 2 of them are in the hands of 2 of Tushini's friends. He himself only has 2. And this time, the legendary Daylily series will appear at the wine tasting, and it won't be the 5 known bottles." Luocio suddenly understood. So, it was him who took the initiative to reveal his whereabouts, and he wasn't found? Song Ying glared at Luocio with dissatisfaction. "If our Song family can't find him, others can't find him either." Luocio smiled and naturally changed the topic. "In this wine tasting, what is the name of the legendary wine?" Song Ying said seriously, "Daylily, Forgetting River." "Forgetting River?" Luocio was stunned, then asked curiously, "Very interesting name. What are the other Daylily series called?" Song Ying didn't expect Luocio to be so curious, but she was a person who liked to be prepared, so her finger drew on the tablet again. She then used her mellow and magnetic voice to slowly say, "Other than the River of Forgetfulness, the 5 known Daylily series are Spider Lily, Limbo, 3 Lives, Yellow Springs, and 97. This." Gan Hong, who was sitting next to them, heard, and couldn't help but frown. "Why does the name sound so desolate?" Song Ying shrugged and said, "Maybe it's a personal preference. It was said that the rich businessman who bought one of the Daylily series at the auction didn't act like other collectors who bought it and kept it well. Instead, he chose to sober up and taste it. After drinking it, his face was covered in tears and he said some strange words. After that, he dispersed his family's property and set up a charity organization, and he disappeared. Someone said that he once saw him in a small fishing village by the sea. He went out to sea alone in a small boat and finally disappeared in the ocean. The wine of the Daylily series is rumored to have incredible power that can make people forget their past and present lives. But some people think that the rich businessman was cursed by the Daylily, so the Daylily series is called a cursed wine." Song Ying paused and thought for a while. Just like those gems left behind in history, even if there are many tragedies that happen to it, people still flock to it. 3 years ago, a rich man in the Middle East once offered 150 million to buy a bottle of the Daylily series. If it was in the past, Luocio would probably sigh like ordinary people and not understand the world of these rich people. But at this time, he had a strong interest in the Daylily series. Forget the past and present lives. The simple chemical composition in red wine doesn't seem to be able to achieve this effect. Of course, this is just a rumor. Song Ying put away her tablet. Because there are also people who say that this rich businessman was actually suspected of commercial fraud and was wanted, so he had no choice but to set up a charity organization and transfer his asset. He also went into hiding. Anyway, there are different opinions. I agree with the latter explanation. Gan Hong said indifferently. Luocio said, "Which bottle of Daylily series did the rich businessman drink? What's the name?" Song Ying glanced at the information and said, "Red Spider Lily." At this time, Gan Hong glanced at a manor that could be vaguely seen in front of them, and whispered, "It seems to be here. Red Spider Lily, the flower that blooms on the road to the underworld." The blue Portia walked on the shady road. Ajay smiled slightly at this time. There are many legends, but in fact, it's just a plant in the Amaryllis family. Zhong Luoyue said indifferently, "It doesn't matter whether the rumor is true or not. What's important is how many people are willing to pay for this rumor. When the whole world thinks it's true, Even if only you know it's false, is it still false? Ajay whistled softly, and the sports car drove out of the small road and came to a gate. At this time, a burly middle-aged uncle in front of the gate quickly pushed the door open. Ajay parked the sports car here, opened his hands and laughed, "Ha ha, Uncle Jean! Long time no see." Uncle Jean also opened his hands and hugged Ajay, and then patted Ajay's shoulder. "Good boy, I haven't seen you for a few years, and you've grown up again." "I've been practicing a lot." Ajay flexed the muscles on his arms and then said directly, "Where's Master? I haven't seen him for a long time, and I brought back some hometown specialties for him." "Your master is busy. Many people came today and he said he needs to prepare well. I haven't seen him so energetic in a long time. By the way, this is..." Uncle Jean was an old man who had followed Tushini for many years, and he had a good eye. When he first saw Zhong Luoyue, he knew that this woman was not simple. Ajay said bluntly, "She's Miss Zhong, now my boss. This time, she came because she's interested in the Forget River." Uncle Jean nodded, but he was not very enthusiastic, and just said indifferently, "Oh, it's not a big deal to have one more, let's go in." Ajay looked at Zhong Luoyue, and then put his hand on Uncle Jin's shoulder, and said while walking, "Uncle Jean, before we start, I want to see Master." Uncle Jean said, "You'll see when the time comes. Your master said that he won't see anyone now. I don't know where he is now." "I won't see him?" Uncle Jean said helplessly, "I can't see him either." Ajay shrugged and said helplessly, "Well, by the way, Uncle Jean, I want to ask you something. Why did Master suddenly bring it over? Or is he going to open it and drink it?" He said, "The time is up." "Time is up? What time?" Ajay asked. Uncle Jean said casually, "How would I know? If I knew, then I would be the god of gamblers." Ajay smiled and didn't say anything. He just glanced at the position of the ring finger on Uncle Jin's left hand. It was a fake finger. The real one had been cut off long ago. "Well, I won't entertain you. I have to get busy. You take your beautiful boss to walk around. The banquet will start at 3 o'clock. It's in the wine cellar. Go there by yourself, okay?" "Okay, go ahead." Ajay waved his hand. Seeing Uncle Jean leave, Zhong Luoyue came to Ajay and said indifferently, "Is this the magic gambling Wu City? It's said that he lost to Tushini and cut off one of his fingers. He also became Tushini's follower. It seems to be true. He's just Uncle Jean. He won't gamble again in his life. 4 Seasons doesn't lack people. Don't think about unnecessary things." Ajay smiled, "Come on, there's still some time. I'll show you around." It was a manor, but there were castle-like buildings in the manor, which wouldn't make people feel bored. Luochio had seen castle-like buildings once, and he stayed there for a long time. That was when he went to Romania with Yu Yi to collect a family's debt. The architectural style here was different from that of Romania. When Song Ying's car came to the parking lot according to the instructions of the servants in the manor, there were already many luxury cars parked here. There seemed to be quite a number of guests. If the bodyguards that these guests brought with them were included, the number would be even greater. Luo Qiu saw several Middle Easterners in white robes, as well as the descendants of Spanish nobles in luxurious clothes. Song Ying was secretly introducing them to him one by one. Although Luochio didn't ask. Although Song Ying had been very resistant to introducing so many people to Luochio, she couldn't bear to see Luochio lose face because of his ignorance at such a gathering of rich guests. Although she didn't want to, she had to do it. Song Ying couldn't understand why she was in such a difficult situation, as if Luochio had taken all the benefits. Miss Ying of the Song family had a good memory, so she naturally remembered a lot of information about powerful rich people. Similarly, as the decision-maker of the Song dynasty group, the little princess of the Song family naturally knew more people because she was backed by the Song family, which had the power to contend with the regular army. But in fact, it was rare to hear that the little princess of the Song family was particularly close to a man, Many people were secretly guessing who the young man who accompanied Song Ying was and what his origin was. But they saw the extraordinary young man suddenly carry Song Ying's handbag, take a step back and slowly follow her. What? It turned out that he was just an attendant who carried the bag. People started making all sorts of guesses about this young man with an extraordinary appearance. Soon, they lost interest in him and stopped paying attention to him. It was to the extent that gradually, in their line of sight, this seemingly extraordinary young man seemed to have suddenly disappeared without a trace. Clearly, he had walked past them. Good for you, Luochio. No wonder you said you would carry my bag at the beginning. Song Ying walked in front, facing the greetings of those people who she knew and didn't know. She always responded with a smile, but she was secretly muttering in her heart. Did this guy know that she might become the center of attention, so he said he would carry her bag at the beginning? Looking at Song Ying's small eyes, how could Gan Hong, who had followed Song Ying for a long time, not know what Song Ying was thinking at this time? At this time, Gan Hong hurriedly whispered to Luochio, Master Chiu, you have to be careful, Miss Ying is a bit of a vengeful person. Luochio said generously, this kind of vengeance is actually harmless. It's not a big grudge, and she won't remember it for a lifetime. Don't you think so? Gan Hong didn't speak, subconsciously avoiding Master Chiu's cold eyes, just lowered her head and silently followed behind Luochio. From the entrance to the hall used to greet guests, they went through several checks. It had to be said that Song Ying's initial consideration was very good. At least Gan Hong, who was wearing a formal dress, wasn't left outside the door, and those very strong bodyguards could only be forced to not enter. At this time, a man wearing the manners worker's uniform walked in front of Song Ying, Luochio, and the others. The man held a tray in his hands, and on the tray were 3 longan-sized crystal balls. Vaguely, one could see that there was a number embedded in the crystal balls, and the numbers in the 3 crystal balls were different. What is this? Song Ying picked up one of the crystal balls, looked at it, and saw the number 63 inside. The man replied politely, It's like this, my master will pick out a fated person at the banquet later. Only this fated person can drink the Forgotten River wine with my master. Song Ying nodded. That is to say, this is everyone's mark, right? Yes. The young man smiled, and then sent the tray in front of Luochio and Gan Hong. Song Ying didn't have the slightest interest in the Forgotten River wine. After taking the crystal ball, she directly put it in her pocket. What she wanted this time was only to be able to persuade Tu Shini. What kind of selection method is it? Unexpectedly, Luochio started chatting with the waiter. I don't know about this. The waiter shook his head and said, My master only ordered for every guest to get a crystal ball. Hurry up and get it done, don't waste time. Song Ying said to Luochio. Luochio could only reach out to take the crystal ball on the tray, but unexpectedly, before he could do so, the crystal ball was already in someone's hand. He only heard a sloppy voice. I like this number, number 6, it's more auspicious, give it to me? I can use it as a gift. Unexpectedly, at this time, Gan Hong's hand shot out like lightning, slapping at the man's hand, directly sending the crystal ball flying. Don't you know first come, first served? This is my young master's. Gan Hong snorted coldly, reaching out to grab the crystal ball that was sent flying. How can it be considered snatching if you don't get it? The young man laughed lightly, suddenly shooting out his finger. At this time, the coin between his fingers directly shot out, directly hitting the crystal ball that was beginning to fall, changing its trajectory, causing the crystal ball to bounce back to him, firmly grasping in the palm of his hand again. Gan Hong suffered a hidden loss, and her face was full of anger. The young man whistled, So beautiful, you don't look good when you're angry. You. Just as Gan Hong was about to rush forward, someone grabbed her arm. She looked back and found that the person who grabbed her was surprisingly Master Chiu. Luochio gently shook his head, looked at the young man, and said indifferently, You can take it if you want, I'll take this one. With that said, Luocio put away the remaining crystal ball on the tray, smiled slightly and said, "Actually, you're right, it's better for her to smile more. Also, the one you took is number 9. The young man was stunned, turned his hand, and looked at the crystal ball in his hand, his face slightly ugly, but he quickly revealed a bright smile. "That's really embarrassing. Haha, hello, Miss Song, long time no see." The other party seemed to know Song Ying. Luocio looked over curiously, only to hear Song Ying say indifferently, "This person is called Ouyang Jie, Tushini's last disciple, the one who won the tournament in Las Vegas last year was him." "Thank you, Miss Song, for remembering me." "Ajay." Ouyang Jie nodded. Chapter 867. Just like the vegetable vendors in the market, the merchants in the electronic street, or different esports teams, there would always be some friction between them. It was a good interpretation of the concept of, those in the same trade are enemies. In the world's gambling industry chain, there were also many combinations of enemies and rivals. For example, both the Song dynasty and the Four-Pole Group were rising stars in the gambling industry. What was even more coincidental was that the leaders of these rising stars were both women in their prime. This made it even easier for busybodies to compare them. When Ouyang Jie shifted his body slightly to allow Zhong Luoyue behind him to appear in the crowd's line of sight, the little princess of the Song family and the beauty of the Hua family locked gazes. Only then did the crowd understand what it meant to go head-to-head with each other, a needle against an awl. Zhong Luoyue, who was wearing a white lady's suit with a blue shirt as the base, had short hair that reached her shoulders. She looked capable and knowledgeable. The little princess of the Song family, on the other hand, had very bright pink and purple hair, which gave people a different feeling. Of course, in the end, it was because the two's appearance could hold up. The moment Song Yingpu saw Zhong Luoyue appear, she frowned slightly, revealing a look of disgust that was easily detectable, but did not make others feel that she was ugly. This was what it meant to be willful with good look. Zhong Luoyue suddenly reached out to Ouyang Jie, and Ouyang Jie gently placed the number 9 crystal ball in her palm. Zhong Luoyue directly walked in front of Luocio, opened her palm, raised the number 9 crystal ball, and put it in front of Luocio, then slowly put it back on the tray. "Excuse me." Luocio just nodded slightly. Zhong Luoyue turned her head and said, "Ajay, let's go." Ouyang Jie shrugged indifferently, followed behind Zhong Luoyue, and walked past Luocio. He paused slightly and then whispered, "You can see the difference between 9 and 6 from so far away. Good eyesight, kid." Luocio just smiled and moved away slightly. Ouyang Jie looked at him strangely, frowned slightly, and didn't say anything. Zhong Luoyue also paused in front of Song Ying, and said indifferently, 2 cars, and the medical expenses of the 5 entourage, I'll have someone send the bill to your office. Song Ying pretended to know nothing and said, "What bill? I don't know." "Aya, did your people get into a car accident? Is it serious? Did you buy insurance? However, you are a guest from afar. If you encounter any difficulties in claiming compensation, feel free to look for me. I have a say in this place. Say hello to Mr. Song for me." Zhong Luoyue said, and directly left Song Ying. Ouyang Jie waved his hand. "Well, it's all right, everyone continue." Under his signal, 6 or 7 servants suddenly appeared in the hall, holding drinks and snacks, and began to walk to the guests. Tushini didn't have any children. As his last disciple, Ouyang Jie naturally had the identity of the host here. The music started, and a band was specially invited to sing in advance to ease the atmosphere. Song Ying sighed at this time, and walked to Luocio. "Are you really not angry, or are you pretending not to be angry? Are you very angry?" Luocio asked. He looked at Zhong Luoyue and Ouyang Jie's backs. "You seem to really dislike Miss Zhong?" Song Ying crossed her arms and said, "When I was studying in England, she and I were in the same school. She was 1 year ahead of me. When I just entered, this woman was already quite famous. I don't know what means she used to gather a large group of rich children around her, and almost controlled the order in the school behind her back. I couldn't stand it, and I didn't want to listen to her. After a long time, naturally more things will happen. Why should I tell you this? Probably you also want someone to listen to you. Luochu said softly, "It's all right. Who wants to have anything to do with you?" Song Ying rolled her eyes, turned her head and walked to the table, picked up a glass of water, and drank it in big mouthfuls. But at this time, Gan Hong looked like she wanted to say something, so Luochu had to ask, "What's the matter?" Gan Hong lowered her head and said, "Master Chiu, I'm sorry, I'm not capable enough to make you lose face. They don't know me." Luochu shook his head. "The so-called face is generally given by people you know. Since they don't know you, naturally there is no such thing. As for sorry, I think whether you have the ability or not, whether you are a capable person, should not be measured like this." Gan Hong looked up and asked curiously, "Master Chiu, you really won't be angry?" "Yes," there was a moment. Luochu suddenly said, "Actually, I even thought that this Mr. Ouyang Jie could do better, but in fact for me, this is already very good. Take it slow, I have plenty of time now." Gan Hong heard this, but she was confused. At this time, Luochu shook his head, picked up the number 9 crystal ball from the tray, and put it in front of Gan Hong. She subconsciously reached out her hand. Luochu put the number 9 crystal ball in Gan Hong's palm, and said softly, "You see, didn't it return to your hand in the end?" Gan Hong was stunned. She held the number 9 crystal ball and fell into deep thought. At this time, Luochu said to Song Ying, "Can I go outside to take a breath of fresh air? There are more people smoking here." It was the smoke of cigars, filling the air. "Why did you return it?" Ouyang Jie took 2 glasses of champagne, and came to Zhong Luoyue. Zhong Luoyue didn't mention a word about Ouyang Jie's initiative, but said indifferently, "Do you remember the man beside Song Ying? Seems like a bag carrier?" Ouyang Jie sat down, tilting the glass in his hand, and looked out of the window through the wine. "The woman who fought with you just now is called Gan Hong." Zhong Luoyue said indifferently, "Last year in Las Vegas, she was Song Ying's bodyguard. I won't be wrong." Ouyang Jie said, "Well, beautiful boss, I admire your ability to recognize people. I heard that you have a photographic memory since childhood, is it true?" Zhong Luoyue looked at Ouyang Jie and said, "Do you remember what Gan Hong said before she fought?" Ouyang Jie was slightly taken aback. He furrowed his brows and carefully tried to recall. Although he wasn't born with a photographic memory, he had received strict training from Tushini, so his memory was outstanding. "Young master." Zhong Luoyue nodded, and then picked up the champagne on the table. "I knew Song Ying when I was in college. From then on, there were almost no men around her. And now, this man is called young master by her former bodyguard. Don't you think his origin is strange?" Ouyang Jie said, "I heard that there is another person in the Song family who is above Song Ying, called Song Haoran. He is the real heir of the Song family. Is it him?" "He is much younger, so it shouldn't be." Zhong Luoyue shook her head. "I have read the information of the Song family and the people who are related to the Song family, but there is no such person. In China, even in the foreign Chinese circle, there is no such person in the new generation. You are too careful." Ouyang Jie didn't agree. "Being careful is like walking on thin ice. Even if you don't work hard, I will work hard for you. Because I am not a gambler." Zhong Luoyue looked at Ouyang Jie. Ouyang Jie suddenly said, "I suddenly know where my master is now." Outside the banquet hall used to entertain guests with various purposes, there were a total of 6 balconies. Luochu came to one of the balconies at this time, where he could see a vineyard planted outside. Gan Hong naturally followed. After all, she was now Luochu's bodyguard. As for Song Ying, there was someone to take care of her. In fact, no one dared to do anything to Song Ying in the Song family's territory. "Those grapes look quite fresh. Do you want to pick some?" Luochu suddenly looked at Gan Hong at this time and said. "Now?" Gan Hong looked at the Master Chiu in surprise. If you want to eat, there are many in the hall. I will bring some to you. They should also be freshly picked. 4 people. Luoqiu smiled slightly. It is more interesting to pick them by yourself. And you can't just pick them casually. You need to choose carefully. Gan Hong shook her head. I don't understand. The banquet officially starts at 3 in the afternoon, right? Yes. There are still more than 40 minutes. Luoqiu looked at the time and said, Then let's go now. But Miss Ing, Luoqiu glanced at the hall. Song Ing was surrounded by several rich people and could not get away, so he said softly, Let's go. She should not be able to get away. Gan Hong naturally chose to listen to Luoqiu now. So the two quietly left the banquet hall from the side door and walked down the spiral stairs in the castle. Soon after, a large vineyard appeared in front of them. No one stopped them, because the guests could only enter with an invitation letter, and they had to go through several checks to make sure there were no hidden weapons or sharp weapons on them. In fact, around the manor there were some professionals who were always on the lookout for safety. They were specially hired professional security personnel from a famous security company. At this time, a relatively ordinary-looking RV slowly drove into the manor. The RV stopped not far from Luoqiu and Gan Hong's road. A white-haired old man dressed neatly came out from the driver's seat and opened the back door. A young woman slowly walked out with the support of the old man. This woman was wearing a black dress and had wrapped herself up very tightly. She was even wearing a hat. Even so, the old man who opened the door for her still opened a black umbrella beside her. This girl is so white. Gan Hong glanced at her in surprise. Is she an albino? It was not because she wore a black dress that made her look particularly white, but because the girl's skin was really so white, it could even be said to be pale. Even the woman's eyebrows were gray. At this time, the woman was holding a long and narrow wooden box in her hands. She raised her head and looked at the manor in front of her. At the same time, she seemed to notice the gazes on her, so she looked at Luoqiu and Gan Hong. After the woman glanced at them, she quickly nodded politely, then lowered her head and looked timid. Accompanied by the old man, she walked toward the entrance of the manor. It seems that I may not only see the legendary Forget Sorrow, Forget River, but also other Forget Sorrow series. Luoqiu suddenly smiled at this time. Gan Hong was startled. She seemed to have thought of something and subconsciously said, Young Master Chiu, are you saying that the bottle that the woman was holding might be a Daylily series? Indeed, that shape and size are quite consistent with the size of a red wine bottle. But how can we be sure? I'll go pick the grapes. Luoqiu smiled and said nothing. At this time, in the vineyard, several women were picking suitable grapes. They saw a young man and woman coming in, but they didn't stop them. These women came from the nearby town to work. Naturally, they didn't dare to offend the guests in the manor. But ordinary rich people wouldn't choose to come here because the mud here would easily dirty their shoes and clothes. Luoqiu didn't stop in front of any grape vines and walked straight. Gan Hong saw a lot of grapes on the way that should be picked. Several times, she thought it was okay and suggested, but Master Chiu just shook his head. Luoqiu suddenly stopped. Zhong Luoyue and Ouyang Jie came out from the other side at this time. The two groups of people happened to meet in the grape field. When Gan Hong saw Ouyang Jie, she quickly walked to Luoqiu's side with a cold expression. Ouyang Jie smiled and said rather innocently, Oh, it seems that I'm hated. Speaking of which, am I that annoying? Why don't you look in the mirror? Gan Hong sneered. Ouyang Jie shrugged and asked directly, You two are not inside but ran out. Is it because the people inside didn't take good care of you? No, they are very polite. We just came out for a walk. Luoqiu said casually, The grapes look good, so I couldn't help but have the idea of taking some without asking. Is that so? Ouyang Jie nodded and suddenly pointed to the other side. The grapes over there should be good. You can go there and pick some. It's better not to go there, because outsiders are not allowed to come close. Is it the rule of the owner here? Luoqiu asked back. Am I considered the owner of this place? Ouyang Jie chuckled. Let them go. Unexpectedly, Zhong Luoyue suddenly said at this time. Ouyang Jie seemed to want to say something at this time, but Zhong Luoyue shook her head slightly. Ouyang Jie had to shrug. Luoqiu smiled at Zhong Luoyue. Thank you. Zhong Luoyue just made a gesture of invitation, and at the same time she made way, indicating that she would follow. Seeing that Luoqiu and Song Yunxian walked first, Ouyang Jie couldn't help but say to Zhong Luoyue, I say, boss, I have been a bad guy. Is it difficult for me to be a bad guy? That's good. Zhong Luoyue said indifferently, we can't prevent everything from happening. It's better to figure out the other party's intention and take the opportunity to figure out his identity to the Song family. This person reminds me of my second brother. Young Master Zhong Luochen? Ouyang Jie was stunned. Chapter 868. Ouyang Jie had been by Zhong Luoyue's side for quite some time. A few years ago, he had finished his apprenticeship under Tushini. He had left the mountain at a young age, and his skills had come from his courage. Naturally, he had made a name for himself in the underworld, and his reputation had grown day by day. However, when he first saw Zhong Luoyue, he knew that he would fall in love with her in the future. If this encounter was compared to a gambling game, Ouyang Jie knew that Zhong Luoyue had a sure win card in her hand from the very beginning. However, just like a gambling game, when the last card had not been revealed, no one knew what the final result would be. Therefore, he followed the principles of a gambler, placing bets along the way, following along carefully and boldly, revealing the card in her hand step by step. Zhong Luoyue was naturally interested in capable people, and at the same time she was also a feminist advocate. She would not belittle men, but she recognized outstanding women more, so there were very few men who could stay by her side to work for her. He knew that her standards for men were very high, so high that she almost used the second young master of the Zhong family as a standard. In fact, Ouyang Jie knew that he was not as good as Zhong Luochen. Other than gambling skills, Ouyang Jie was not confident that he could surpass the second young master of the Zhong family in any other aspect. He was an almost perfect man. Even though Ouyang Jie only had the opportunity to meet Zhong Luochen during the Zhong family's annual family meeting last year during the New Year. At that time, Ouyang Jie had just won the competition for the Four Seasons group in Las Vegas, and he was in high spirits and at the peak of his popularity. However, it was also when his personal aura and confidence were at its peak that Ouyang Jie's pride was gradually crushed by Zhong Luochen, who he had met for the first time. Although he did not degenerate to the point of being depressed, from that time onwards, he began to agree with the saying, some people were born to be kings. Zhong Luochen was one of the few men that Zhong Luoyue would often talk about. At the same time, he was also someone that she, intentionally or unintentionally, wanted to surpass. In this regard, Ouyang Jie was convinced. However, it was precisely because of this that Ouyang Jie was very puzzled by Zhong Luoyue's comparison of a stranger whom she had just met for the first time and had barely spoken more than 5 sentences to. Looking at Luoqiu, who is walking leisurely with Gan Hong like a tourist, Ouyang Jie doesn't find it unbelievable. If it were any other man who caught Zhong Luoyue's interest, he would beat them up even if he didn't beat them up to prove that he was outstanding, so outstanding that he could stay by her side forever. But what made Ouyang Jie feel like he had seen a ghost was that he didn't have such thoughts at all. Towards this person, he couldn't produce the slightest competitive feeling. He couldn't say that he liked him, but he didn't subconsciously dislike him. Even if he did, he knew that it was only because he forced it out. In fact, Ouyang Jie even hoped to speak a few more words with him. The man that Song Ying brought is a bit strange. How does he know about this place? Thinking about it, Ouyang Jie suddenly stopped. Hearing Ouyang Jie's surprise, Zhong Luoyue looked at Ouyang Jie strangely. Ouyang Jie suddenly frowned and said, There are a lot of grape trees planted here. When my master planted them, he planted them according to the position of the 64 hangings in Zhou-yi. The complexity is like a maze. Even the old people in the manor often get lost in the core position here. Even for me, it took me an entire month to memorize the way here. Is this really his first time here? Zhong Luoyue listened and suddenly looked around. She suddenly found that she couldn't remember the way here. It seemed that everywhere looked the same, making it difficult to distinguish. You mean to say, he also knows that your master is here? Zhong Luoyue said with a straight face. Ouyang Jie nodded. Then, he suddenly shook his head and said, Actually, my master doesn't come out that many times a day. Most of the time, he would rather stay inside the house. However, he insists on going to the fields almost every day. However, he doesn't spend too much time in the fields, usually around 1 or 2 hours. Sometimes, however, if it's cloudy, he will stay for a while. He said that he is afraid of the heat and that his body can't take it. Today was a cloudy day. Zhong Luoyue raised her head to look at the sky. Ouyang Jie then continued, This is not a secret. The old people in the manor know about this. If you ask carefully, you will know, but today's guests should be here for the first time. Don't talk about it first. Otherwise, we will lose them. After saying that, Ouyang Jie gestured to Zhong Luoyue, and the two of them quickly followed. Different from the general scientific management method, the vines here were in a neat straight line. The vines here were unusually tall and densely grown, like a short wall. Moreover, they were in a curved shape like a maze. Gan Hong had gradually discovered that there was something wrong with this place. She was about to persuade this Master Chiu to go back when Luoqiu suddenly stopped. In front of them, there was a wide open space in front of them. Around them was an open space that looked like a circle. It was not big, about 100 square meters or so. There was no pavilion here, but there was a grape trellis. Under the grape trellis there were some cushions for people to sit on. There was a well next to it. There was no water pump equipment. It used the most primitive method of drawing water from a wooden bucket. A small wooden bucket was erected at the entrance of the well. So there is such a place. Gan Hong felt a little surprised. Although the grape trellis in the field was not exquisite and beautiful, but along the way, other than the heavy grapes, there were trees. At a glance, it was naturally a different feeling. Luoqiu just smiled and walked into the grape trellis. At this time, in front of them, there were already people under the grape trellis. One of them was a man wearing a white half-mask. His hair was gray and he wore a shirt vest. His body was thin, but he gave off a tall and straight feeling. Gan Hong, who had seen Song Ying's information, recognized him at first glance. This person was probably the legendary gambling legend, the god of gamblers Tushini. As for the other person, she was a woman. She looked like she was in her 30s, but she also looked like she was in her 40s. She was not an Asian, but it was hard to tell what nationality she was. This woman had long blonde hair. Perhaps it was because of the sunlight, but it also appeared white. She wore a purple dress. She did not seem to be afraid of the heat. Her appearance was noble. The two of them sat opposite each other. They were concentrating on the chess game on the table. The two of them were playing chess. Luoqiu quietly walked to the grape trellis. Then, he took off his shoes and went to the wooden floor under the grape trellis. He came to the side of Tushini and the woman playing chess. He watched the game without saying anything. The two of them who were playing chess did not seem to care. Tushini just looked at the black and white chessboard. The luxurious woman was holding a flag. She did not play for a long time. She seemed to be deep in thought. She was holding a chariot. Seeing this, Gan Hong also quickly took off her shoes in front of the grape trellis. Then, she quietly came to Luoqiu's side. However, she did not understand why the two of them who were playing chess did not take off their shoes. This Master Chiu took off his own shoes first. At this time, Zhong Luoyue and Ouyang Jie also came to the open space and saw this scene. Ouyang Jie whispered in front of Zhong Luoyue, That is my master. He is playing chess with someone. My master doesn't like noise when he is playing chess. So, it's better not to speak later. Wait for them to finish playing. Zhong Luoyue nodded. Who is the woman next to him? Ouyang Jie said. She is my master's close friend, Lady Eve. She is British, a very mysterious woman. I heard that she inherited a large amount of inheritance. Every year, she comes here twice. She stays here for a while and then leaves. But she rarely comes in contact with others. I didn't talk much with her before. I can only be regarded as an acquaintance. But we are not familiar with each other. I don't know much about her. Ouyang Jie said with a smile. This person is very polite. She knows not to disturb. She took off her shoes and walked silently. Is that so? Zhong Luoyue said indifferently. Ouyang Jie was stunned. Is it not so? Zhong Luoyue looked at Gan Hong and said slowly, if the master doesn't take off his shoes first, how can the follower take it off first? Look at Gan Hong's heels. Abrasions. Ouyang Jie's eyes were very sharp. He immediately saw the abrasions under the pair of long legs. It was just that, as a trained bodyguard, it was normal for her to get injured during training. Such a small scratch wouldn't affect Gan Hong at all. She probably didn't feel anything at all. At most, she would feel a little uncomfortable. You are quite protective of the fairer sex. Ouyang Jie smiled. It seems you are also a person who cherishes the fairer sex. I like that. Do you want me to take off your shoes? Zhong Luoyue cast a cold glance at Ouyang Jie. As for Ouyang Jie, who was already used to it, he simply shrugged his shoulders. He regarded this coldness as a sign of amorous feelings and was overjoyed. Zhong Luoyue also took off her shoes in front of the grape rack. Then, she placed them to the side before walking over. She walked to the opposite side where Luoqiu and Gan Hong stood, watching the game silently. But the game didn't last long. In the end, Madame Eve put the chariot in her hand out of the chessboard. She exhaled slowly, folded her hands on her lap, and said with a smile, I lost. Tushini just nodded. Ms. Eve stood up at this time. She looked around at the two pairs of young men and women on the left and right, but did not speak. She just picked up the handbag next to her and opened it. Suddenly, she took out a small and flat box from it. After opening it, there was a handkerchief folded into a square. Madame Eve took out the handkerchief and suddenly squatted down. Her action was surprising because Ms. Eve took the handkerchief to wipe the abrasions on Gan Hong's heels. Gan Hong was shocked and panicked all of a sudden. Not because she was afraid of the other party, but because she was a little stunned by her kindness. She subconsciously stepped back. No, I can do it myself. Madame Eve, however, held Gan Hong's ankle, raised her head, smiled, and shook her head. Gan Hong subconsciously looked at Luoqiu, only to see that Luoqiu also shook his head slightly. Gan Hong could only awkwardly let Madame Eve carefully wipe the wound for her. The handkerchief was a little moist, and it felt cool when applied on the wound. There was also a light scent of laurel. Soon after, Ms. Eve stood up, folded the handkerchief in her hand, and then put it back in the box. Then, she said to Gan Hong, Thank you. No, I should thank you. Gan Hong was completely defeated by the other party's almost perfect manners. At the same time, she couldn't help but feel, this lady was really a strange person. It's almost time, I'll go back first. Ms. Eve glanced at Tushini. 97, I'll return it to you later. Tushini made a gesture of invitation. Only then did Ms. Eve look at Luoqiu, smiled slowly, and said something shocking, I like you. Although this woman looked old, she was so noble. Her purple dress wrapped her body like a completely ripe grape, as if it could drip water. But even so, her words still surprised Ouyang Jie and Zhong Luoyue. This Ms. Eve was very open-minded. She walked to Luoqiu's side, her eyes blurred, and said softly, You will be a perfect lover, no woman can escape from you, but unfortunately, her voice was so low that only she could hear it. You don't have a heart. Luoqiu was stunned and then smiled, Thank you for reminding me. I live in the room at the top of the tower. Madame Eve's eyes moved like a gentle breeze, leaving behind a meaningful smile. Then, she slowly disappeared into the lush grape trees in front of everyone's eyes. Tushini didn't speak, but began to tidy up the chessboard and chess pieces on the table. He gathered the black and white chess pieces one by one, arranged them neatly, and finally closed the box. Ouyang Jie saw the subtle atmosphere, so he took the initiative to ask, Master, the 97-foot that Ms. Eve said just now, is it your bottle of Daylily 97? Why did she say she would return it to you? Tushini was silent for a moment before he slowly opened his mouth. Surprisingly, his voice didn't sound old at all. Instead, it was very bright. I gave it to her for 20 years, but she didn't even take a sip. It was a waste, so I had no choice but to take it back. If she doesn't drink it, it will change its taste. Ouyang Jie was stunned, and saw that Zhong Liyue's pair of eyes had been sizing up Tushini, so he leaned to the side and whispered, Don't mind him, my master is a bit strange, but he's actually a very good person. Zhong Liyue nodded, and suddenly said softly, It's said that in the Daylily series brewed by Mr. Tu, there's a bottle called 97, which reminds me of a sentence in There's No Tree in the World, We'll be friends for 100 years, whoever dies at 97 will wait 3 years on the bridge of helplessness. With such a meaning, Mr. Tu seems to be a very affectionate person. Tushini smiled, Is there such a thing? You have a rich imagination. Zhong Liyue opened her mouth slightly. Tushini said indifferently, The reason why I named it 97-foot is because 20 years ago happened to be 97. I didn't think of any other good name, so I just used this. That was Gan Hong's very soft, and she couldn't help but laugh. Yen PS1. Thank you to the book friend under the parasol tree for bowing to the capitalist boss. PS2. I feel like I'm going to die, report on the lack of updates. Yen_Molord, 1/2, Universes Molord 0/2, under the parasol tree Molord 0/2. Chapter 869. This was somewhat beyond Lucifer's expectations. Even now, she still couldn't react. Her mind was in a state of chaos when the world was created. Let's call it dumbfounded. Lucy, get up. Charlotte came in with a piece of clothing. It was a black nun's dress. It was said that this dress was worn by Charlotte when she was young, and it was modified from Mother Dellen's old clothes. In other words, this was a piece of clothing with a smell. I'm talking about the smell of inheritance. Lucifer opened her eyes and sat up in a daze. At this time, Charlotte began to fiddle with her hair, carefully combing it. She was in a very good mood. Little Lucy, your hair is so good. You didn't wash it last night, but it's not greasy at all. Lucifer didn't want to talk to Charlotte and threw her an empty look. Charlotte quickly put on the nun's clothes for Lucifer and took her to the kitchen behind the cloister. Previously, only Mother Dellon and Charlotte lived in the cloister. Now that there was a little girl, breakfast was prepared more than usual. Shalty and Nanny Dellon would pray before eating, but Lucifer wouldn't move before that. After Nanny Dellon and Shalty finished praying, Shalty would use a spoon to feed the freshly made vegetable soup to Lucifer. When the milky white soup was fed to Lucifer's mouth, her upper and lower jaws were basically motionless. It was sticky and fragrant and even a little fishy because of a little dried fish. The fresh soup would overflow because of this. At this time, Charlotte would quickly use a handkerchief to wipe the traces at the corner of Lucifer's mouth. The child didn't even move her mouth. Charlotte could only use her hands to provide her with a little help to help her eat. No matter if it was breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Every time Nanny Deland saw this scene, she would sigh pitifully. She felt sorry for this child who had suffered a lot. Since Shalty took her to the village outside to ask for help, this child had been silent as if she had been greatly stimulated. Because the way out was affected by the landslide, they were still trapped. On the other hand, the monastery had stored up a lot of food, and there was even a cultivated vegetable field behind it. Food would not be a problem in the short term. The Reverend Mother and Charty did not use mobile phones. There was only a landline in the monastery, and communication had not been restored. Perhaps the landline was broken due to the landslide. The two nuns, one old and one young, did not feel much annoyed by this situation. They said that all they had to do was wait patiently. Compared to that, Nanny Delon and Shalty were more concerned about how to get the poor child to speak. What they didn't know was that the great queen of hell, Lucifer, who was sitting on the pride throne of the original sin, didn't finish her sentence because of the punishment of not being able to lie and also because she was worried about Nanny Delan. The last time she went out, she used an ancient spell to summon a blood elf in the forest, but it was purified, melted. This was what happened. That day, Lucifer happily followed Shalty back to the monastery on the old motorcycle. At night, she sneaked into Nanny Delan's room, intending to use Nanny Delan's flesh and blood as food to raise the blood elf. Nanny Delan, who had been praying devoutly for decades, had never married, and had maintained her purity. A seed of holy power had been born in her body. Although there was still a long time before it could be activated, and with Nanny Delan's age, it was probably too late even if there was a systematic method. However, this could not deny that this was the best material Lucifer could find. Most importantly, Reverend Delan was too devout. The moment the blood elf attached itself to Reverend Delan's chest, it was destroyed by the hidden power of Reverend Delan's sacred power seed before it could devour her. It was destroyed. If they were destroyed, then so be it. As the noble queen of hell, she had countless knowledge. Even if Lucifer's plan failed, she naturally had other methods. But she couldn't defeat Nanny Delan. She couldn't even defeat Nanny Delan. She couldn't even defeat Shalty, because she was just a child now. She didn't have the ability to lift anything heavy. She would be tired after taking 2 steps, and she would be hungry when the time was up. She couldn't even lie. She had to answer many questions directly. Lucifer felt very tired. She simply let herself give up on herself temporarily, just like a child with autism. This was to prevent the 2 nuns from asking her too much about herself. How should an autistic child get along? Generally speaking, it was necessary to be patient and gentle. Try to guide the child to think about happy things and try not to touch the child's bad memories. Because Lucifer appeared like a child who had been abused, after Nanny Delan and Shalty discussed it, they decided not to ask about little Lucy's past as much as possible. Instead, they chose to slowly open little Lucy's heart. Although little Lucy didn't say a word or even respond to her for the past few days, Nanny Delan didn't lack patience. She even chose to tell little Lucy a short story from the Bible whenever she had free time to teach her how to be a good person. Nanny Delan even played the piano well. There was a very old piano in the auditorium, but it was well maintained. Nanny Delan would call Shalty to sing hymns here in the afternoon. Shalty's singing voice was really good. It could even be described as beautiful. In this secluded monastery, the old nanny and the young nun were enjoying themselves. Time passed quietly. This was like an ideal place that stood aloof from worldly affairs. It was just that there was an autistic queen of hell. Lucifer still looked like she had nothing to live for. When she was brought to the auditorium to listen to the hymns, she didn't even blink her eyes. She just looked at the statue of the Virgin Mary in front of her. Suddenly, there was a change in Lucifer's eyes. They were no longer empty, but gradually regained their color. This was because Shalty's singing had suddenly stopped, and Nanny Delan's music had also disappeared. But they didn't actually stop. They still kept singing and playing the piano. Nanny Delan even looked at Shalty at this time, with an intoxicated smile on her face. Shalty also put her hands together, closed her eyes, and opened her mouth. She was singing a high-pitched part. But they stopped, as if they pressed the pause button. Lucifer suddenly stood up and quickly looked around. Finally, she suddenly looked up because she heard a slight sound. It was a sound that could make her instinctively hate, the gospel from the kingdom of heaven. Above the auditorium, fluttering feathers suddenly fell from the ceiling. These white feathers were illusory, but they were like falling cherry blossoms. At this time, a figure slowly descended from the ceiling. Lucifer, my brother, long time no see. Gabriel, who was wearing a plain straw sandal, stood with his hands behind his back, silently observing Lucifer's appearance. Lucifer's back was slightly sweaty. She hadn't been so nervous for many years. Long time no see. Lucifer calmly smiled. You're the angel of gospel, Gabriel. Why are you not spreading the gospel in the kingdom of heaven? Why are you interested in coming to the human world? Look at you, Lucifer, my brother. Gabriel slowly said, although I don't know what you've experienced, I'm more willing to believe that this is a punishment from fate for disobeying your father. In fact, I've been here for 2 days, and I've been observing you these 2 days. Lucifer sneered. It's just like how he only watches the world from the kingdom of heaven. Sure enough, you too have the same desire to peep at others. Gabriel wasn't angry. Instead, he said with a smile, Father told me to come and see you, but he didn't say what I should do. I think he wants me to deal with it myself. I wanted to take you back, but now I've changed my mind. Lucifer narrowed her eyes. At this moment, Gabriel looked around at Nanny Theron and then at Shalti. Suddenly, he waved his hand and said, This Nanny Theron will be a good petitioner. On the day she reaches the end of her life, I'll come and take her away, as a reward for her taking care of you. What did you say? Lucifer suddenly had a bad feeling. I know you can't use your power now. Your body is too weak and dangerous, Gabriel said indifferently. Gabriel said mildly, I'll activate Mother Dellen's seed of holy power and give Sister Charty the seed of gospel. This way they can avoid many dangers. Lucifer's heart sank to the bottom of the abyss. Gabriel waved his hand again. Suddenly, shackles made of holy light appeared on Lucifer's hands, and a chain made of holy light was attached to the left shackle. The chain extended to Shalti's and Grandma Dellen's hands and finally disappeared. My brothers, they'll take care of you for me. Gabriel spread his wings. Then, goodbye. Wait. Gabriel. You can't do this to me. Lucifer roared at the rising figure. Come down. Come down. I'll wait until the day you regret it. The illusory feathers suddenly disappeared. Only Gabriel's voice echoed and faded away. At this moment, the sound of the piano and the singing started again. Lucifer sat down weakly with her head lowered. She knew she couldn't leave the 2 nuns. The shackles Gabriel had put on her had tied her to them. Lucifer suddenly thought of a certain monkey who had been suppressed under a mountain for 500 years. Many years ago, Lucifer had once gone to see that monkey. Looking at the monkey drinking copper and iron juice at that time, she had laughed wantonly. Every dog has its day, and every dog has its day. Gabriel, one day I'll fight my way up. I'll use a transformation spell to turn you into a sow and put you in the dirtiest pigsty. Oh, my child, how can you say that? Mother Theron suddenly stopped and rushed to Lucifer's side. She said solemnly, This is blasphemy. My God. As she spoke, Mother Delon began to put her hands together and quickly recited the scripture of repentance for her. Lucifer only felt that the invisible shackles on her hands were burning like fire. She was in great pain and broke out in cold sweat. Mother Theron, little Lucy is foaming at the mouth. Gon Hong knew it was impolite to laugh like this, so she quickly covered her mouth. She suddenly thought of Song Ing. If Miss Ing was here, she probably wouldn't let go of this opportunity to ridicule Zhong Luoyue. Zhong Luoyue just glanced at Gon Hong casually. Ouyang Jia came out to smooth things over. Master, you're being naughty again. This is Miss Zhong, my boss now. Zhong Luoyue said, It's okay. I made a fool of myself in front of Mr. Tuesday. At the same time, I realized how ignorant people are. Tushini shook his head and looked at Zhong Luoyue. She said softly, We are always willing to make wild guesses, but often ignore the truth. And we always like to imagine things that are originally very simple. In the end, it's just that people's hearts are a little complicated. Thank you, Mr. Tu, for giving me such a lesson. Tushini nodded. You're eloquent and smart, but a little eager to show yourself. You still lack some calmness. But it's rare for someone your age. Well, you said your surname is Zhong. Are you from the Zhong family in Hua Nation? Yes. Zhong Luoyue nodded with a smile. Tushini nodded again, and then looked at Luoqiu and Gan Hong. What about these two? Master, they came with Miss Song Ying from the Song family. Ouyang Jie hurriedly said at this time. It's just that they were in a hurry and didn't have time to formally introduce each other. Tushini waved his hand and motioned for Ouyang Jie to stop talking. Instead, he looked at Luoqiu and said, How did you get here? I spent a lot of effort building this vineyard. It's easy for ordinary people to get lost. Recently, I went to a relative's house. He has a lot of books there. Luoqiu smiled and said, There are a lot of books on the Book of Changes and the 8 trigrams. I looked at them a few more times, but I didn't expect that they would come in handy. Gan Hong was stunned. There were indeed a lot of ancient books in the hall where Father Song kept the bookshelves, but Master Chiu just looked at them casually and didn't look like he had studied them carefully. Now that she thought about it, Gan Hong realized how complicated this vineyard was. It was a little hard to understand. Just in time, just in time? Tushini nodded. She didn't know what he was thinking, but he just said indifferently, You just happen to be good. As the saying goes, there are no stories without coincidences. Many things in this world seem to have no pattern, but in the end they are still connected. There was no such thing as an independent development of all things. It may seem unintentional, but who knows if it's intentional or not. But, Tushini paused. Ajay is my disciple, so it's normal for him to come back and look for me. What about you? Why are you here? Luoqiu looked around. I actually wanted to pick some grapes, but I wanted to find the best ones, so I ended up here. Pick grapes? Tushini was startled. To give them away. Luoqiu nodded. Tushini muttered to himself for a moment, then suddenly said, The grapes here are indeed the best in the entire vineyard. It's quite impressive that you were able to find this place. However, I didn't say that I could give them to you if you wanted to pick them. That's a pity. Luoqiu nodded. I was reckless. But it's not like I can't give them to you. It's also fate that you were able to come here. In any case, I'm the host, so I can't disappoint my guests. How about this? Tushini suddenly smiled. There's still some time. Play a game of Go with me. If you beat me, I'll let you pick some grapes. How about that? I guarantee that they'll be the best grapes in this area. Luoqiu said, Chess? Tushini nodded. Is there a problem? Luoqiu shook his head. I haven't learned it yet. Tushini was startled. He asked curiously, Then why did you watch us play Go just now? Luoqiu said matter-of-factly, Watching without speaking is the most basic courtesy, isn't it? Tushini was startled. He nodded. How about this? Tell me what kind of Go game you know. Luoqiu thought for a moment and said, I know how to play Go, but I haven't played it many times. I only know a little about Go, and I've lost a lot of games against computers. I'm afraid the only one I'm familiar with is Gomoku. Chapter 870. The chessboard of chess was very different from the chessboard of Gomoku. The chess side only had 16 flags, which was far less than the number of chess pieces held by the Gomoku side. Simply put, if the chess pieces were used as substitutes, one side could only play 16 times at most. Because of the space of the chessboard, the paths that could be connected to 5 pieces were limited. If the other rules of Gomoku were included, such as the forbidden move, the 3-hand exchange, or the mountain pass rule, etc., then this Gomoku game with only 16 moves was much more difficult than imagined. Whether it was Ouyang Jie or Zhong Luoyue, they were both people with excellent memory and proficient in algorithms, so they could easily calculate the possibility of connecting 5 pieces. Basically, if one didn't deliberately give in to the other, the most likely outcome would be a draw between the two sides. However, Tushini said that he could only pick the grapes if he won. In other words, Luocio could only win. There was no doubt that this might be a chess game that was destined to be a draw from the beginning. In terms of the conditions of the chess game, Tushini still had the upper hand. You are the guest. You can choose to play first or later. Tushini made a gesture of invitation and added, "There is a forbidden move." Luocio nodded and picked up a chariot. He did not immediately put it down. Instead, he asked, "We only use the chess pieces here?" Tushini nodded. "This game is very simple. We only use 16 chess pieces from each side." Understood. Luocio smiled slightly, then put it on the upper right corner of the chessboard. "I choose the black piece." Chess was different from the chessboard of Go. It was composed of small square pieces neatly arranged. There were a total of 8 rows and 8 columns, a total of 64 grid. Luocio put it on the upper right corner, which was the position of H8. Seeing Luocio put it in this position, Ouyang Jie and Zhong Luoyue frowned at the same time. If it were them, even if they knew that it was a draw, they would put it in the center of the chessboard. At least they could create more possibilities for themselves. At least they would not lose half of their chances at the beginning. Not to mention there was a forbidden move. Tushini glanced at Luocio. Seeing that this young man was calm, he smiled slightly, picked up a chariot, and put it on the position of d5. Then, Luocio picked up another chariot and put it on the position of h7. Tushini also picked up a chariot and put it on the position of c5. Luocio picked up a bishop at this time and put it on the position of h6. Tushini looked up at Luocio again, nodded, picked up a bishop, and put it on the position of d4. Luocio picked up the second bishop and put it on the position of h5. Tushini shook his head at this time, picked up his second bishop, and prepared to put it on the position of h4. However, just as Tushini's bishop was about to land, it suddenly stopped. He raised his head and looked at Luocio strangely. In the end, Tushini did not put down his bishop, but put it back in the chess box. Then, under the surprised gaze of Ouyang Jie and Zhong Luoyue, he stood up and said, "Wait a minute." Tushini walked to another table under the grape trellis, took a hollow bamboo basin, and a pair of scissors. He looked up at the plump fruits hanging down from the grape trellis. Finally, he chose a bunch and cut it with a pair of scissors. Then, he came to Luocio. "Take it." Luocio smiled and said apologetically, "I cheated. A win is a win, a loss is a loss." Tushini shook his head. "It was my mistake to not set the rules in the beginning. But you're right, this was indeed a trick, and it's also considered breaking the rules. It's just that the rules were originally set by people, it's up to you." "Thank you for the grapes, Mr. Tuesday," Luocio nodded slightly. "I've already gotten what I wanted, and I think that since Mr. Tu picked them himself, they must be the best here. Then, I won't disturb Mr. Tu and your student. Ganhong, let's go." Ganhong was stunned, but seeing that young Master Chiu was really leaving without any hesitation, she hurriedly put on her shoes and followed him. It seemed that the bruise on her heel did not hurt at all. Ganhong looked at it subconsciously and found that there were only some red marks. Strange, it should be a bruise? "Master, why did you admit defeat in this game?" After Luocio left, Ouyang Jie sat down and frowned. "You haven't played yet, right?" Tushini said indifferently. "Then tell me, where should I play?" Ouyang Jie subconsciously pointed to the position of h4. "Of course it should be here, or he would have specified." "Wait, it wasn't specified beforehand. Could it be outside the chessboard?" Tushini smiled and began to tidy up the chessboard and chess pieces on the table. "He didn't beat me with chess skills, he beat me with something outside the rules. This is cheating." Ouyang Jie shook his head. Tushini said slowly, "Is using the chessboard to play Gamoku proper? He asked me if I could only play with this chess piece, but he didn't say that I had to play on the chessboard. Ouyang Jie opened his mouth, but he was speechless. Winning is winning, losing is losing. It's not like I haven't lost before, Tu Shini said earnestly. It's just a bunch of grapes, I can afford to lose. But, Ouyang Jie wanted to say something. Tu Shini shook his head and patted Ouyang Jie's shoulder gently. It's about time. You take Miss Zhong to the cellar first. I will go back and change my clothes. It's about time to go over. Tu Shini walked out from the grape rack and looked around. Then, he chuckled. Outside the chessboard, the person playing chess. He sure has a big heart. Then, he left with his hands behind his back. Luoqiu had said that he wanted to give the freshly picked grapes away as a gift. Gan Hong had thought that they might be something he wanted to bring back for his father. However, Gan Hong suddenly realized that the grapes that Master Chiu was holding had disappeared. Maybe he dropped it somewhere. Luo Chiu didn't care about it. It's not easy to win it back. Let me go and look for it. Gan Hong hesitated. However, before she could put her plan into action, they were immediately found by Song Ying when they returned to the banquet hall. Song Ying scolded them for running around. However, when she learned from Gan Hong that they had met the god of gamblers, Tu Shini, and that Luoqiu had played a game of Gamoku with him, Song Ying's eyes widened in disbelief. She knew that Gan Hong would not lie to her. At least, there was no need for her to do so. However, because it was true, Song Ying felt helpless. She had planned to steal some grapes from others on a whim, and then met the legendary god of gamblers. Why did such a plot sound like a student who had just entered the campus meeting an old man who was sweeping the floor? The old man was the principal. You met Tu Shini. Did you invite him to join the Song dynasty? After Song Ying complained in her heart, she immediately asked. Luoqiu shook his head and asked curiously, Can I represent the Song dynasty group? Of course you can. Song Ying glared at him and snorted, No. Luoqiu smiled and did not care. At this time, Luoqiu suddenly saw a lot of guests gathered in a corner of the hall. He asked curiously, What are they doing? Do you want to know? Song Ying crossed her arms and continued to snort, See for yourself. Luoqiu nodded and walked toward the crowd in the corner. Song Ying looked and suddenly stared. She was inexplicably irritated and stomped her feet. So obedient? At this time, there was a sudden exclamation from the crowd in the corner. Gan Hong was very experienced as a follower. Before Luoqiu arrived, she had already squeezed through the crowd so that Luoqiu could easily see the thing that surprised the guest. It was a man in an old suit. He was leaning against the wall and sitting on the ground with his legs crossed. The man's face was slightly pale and there were some roots on his face. He looked like he was about 40 years old. His hair was messy and he had a typical Oriental face. No matter how one looked at it, this man was out of tune with the people present. He looked like a poor man who had mistakenly entered a rich people's gathering. At this time, this slightly down-and-out man was holding a bead that was bigger than a fist in one hand. It looked like a crystal, or maybe it was just a glass product. In front of the destitute man was a slightly plump middle-aged man. This middle-aged man was squatting in front of the down-and-out man at this time. He was seriously looking at the polished crystal ball in his hand. The exclamation came from his mouth. Oh, my God, it changed again. This time it's Changhe. Incredible! The middle-aged man exclaimed again. Luoqiu looked at the small ball in the down-and-out man's hand with interest. At this time, Gan Hong asked a lady next to her, Excuse me, what happened here? The lady glanced at the man's clothes and said casually, This man said that he has a treasure in his hand. Different people can see different sceneries through it. It's like a small world is hidden inside. Some people didn't believe it, so they tried it. Maybe it's true? My God. Hearing the lady's tone, she was probably one of the people who were watching the show. A small ball that can see different sceneries? Gan Hong looked at Luoqiu in confusion. Song Ying followed behind him. What an incredible treasure! At this time, the middle-aged man looked slightly excited and said directly, "Sir, are you selling this treasure ball? Please name a price. I want to have it. It's too exquisite, too incredible." "I'm sorry, this treasure ball is not for sale." The down-and-out man spoke fluent local language and said indifferently, "This is probably the only one in the world. If I sell it to you, I won't have it anymore." The middle-aged man was unwilling to give up and said quickly, "Name a price, no matter how expensive it is. It's really a treasure, and it's far from what gemstones and diamonds can compare to." "This. Do you want to consider it?" The middle-aged man's attitude was not bad. He only begged the other party to sell it, and did not force the other party to sell it. He even offered a shocking price. On one hand, it was because he cherished his reputation. After all, there were many people who were famous here. On the other hand, although this person looked down and out, he could pass through layers of checks and come here without being chased away. He was probably a guest invited by the god of gamblers, or someone who had the ability to get an invitation letter. "Okay, please give me some time to think about it." The down-and-out man seemed to shake his head, and there was a reluctant expression on his face, as if he could not make a decision. Pretending to be mysterious. Suddenly, a voice came from the crowd. It was Song Ing who said it. The down-and-out man looked at the voice and saw Song Ing. The down-and-out man smiled. "Whether it's real or fake, you'll know when you see it." As he said that, the down-and-out man slowly stood up, holding the treasure ball in his hand, and walked in front of Song Ing. He slowly lifted the treasure ball, and placed it in front of Song Ying's eyes. Song Ing did not have a good impression of this guy who was trying to get attention from the crowd, but this treasure ball was placed in front of her, and it was not easy to not look at it. She sighed and looked at the treasure ball. "Isn't there nothing? What a scam." Song Ing frowned. This treasure ball was just an ordinary glass bead. Other than the fact that it was a little too big, there was nothing special about it at all. "You have to look at it with your heart." The down-and-out man said indifferently, "Legend has it that fish only have a memory of 7 seconds, so they can't remember so many beautiful things in the world. It's too cruel for them. There is a type of fish that, in order to keep the beautiful things they have seen, they seal their memories in their tears." "How many years have passed?" The down-and-out man's voice was full of magnetism, like washing on the beach or the evening waves. It had a kind of gentleness that made people feel comfortable listening to it. "And how many years have passed? The tears that fell gathered into a bead, and entrusted the beautiful things they have seen in their lives. Why do you look at it with suspicion?" Song Ing looked at the treasure ball, and her gaze gradually changed. This treasure ball was originally transparent, and she could even see the lines on the down-and-out man's palm through its material. But at this time, it suddenly became hazy, as if something was brewing inside this treasure ball. It was as if it was covered by countless white clouds. When the clouds parted, Song Ing saw an island in the middle of the sea. Blue sky, blue sea, white fine sand. This was a primitive land that had not been polluted, and it was more beautiful than any of the so-called pirate tourist holy lands she had ever been to. So beautiful! Song Ing subconsciously reached out her hands, and picked up the treasure ball from the down-and-out man's hands, as if she was possessed. At this time, Luochio suddenly covered the treasure ball with his hand, blocking Song Ying's line of sight, and at the same time holding the treasure ball in his hand. Song Ying was stunned for a moment, but she saw Luochio looking at the down-and-out man at this time, and said indifferently, "Can I see it too?" Yen 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 PS1. Thank you to the cute owner of Smoke Addict Jiangshan, sending my purest, beep, to the capitalist boss. Chapter 871. He didn't seem to be so abrupt as to say, "I also want to see it." Everyone was curious, especially in the face of magical things. No matter if it was an adult or a child. Although Song Ing was a little annoyed that Luochio interrupted her, the Song family would never scold the Song family in front of outsiders, so she didn't say a word. On the contrary, Song Ing was even vaguely curious. She was curious to see Luocchio's surprised expression, to see if this guy was really like an old monk. Of course, it won't refuse anyone who praises it. The down-and-out man smiled at this time, making a gesture of invitation. Of course, in addition to the intention, stupid people can also see it. Why? Luocchio asked back. Everyone seemed to be curious. The stout businessman at the beginning slightly straightened his chest, because he saw it. The down-and-out man said indifferently, "Ignorance will blind our eyes. Since our eyes are blinded, how can we see the beauty of things?" Luocchio nodded, holding the treasure ball, and began to look at it. But first, he glanced at the guests around. They were all looking at him expectantly. Most of them knew Song Ing. If even the little princess of the Song dynasty saw the beauty of the treasure ball, then this treasure ball might be a real treasure. With the wealth of the Song dynasty, there was no need to deceive anyone. At the beginning, they considered that this down-and-out man might be a swindler, but miraculously, they dispelled a lot of thoughts because of this. "Well, let me see." Luocchio smiled at this time, holding the treasure ball, and began to pace. It seemed that he had just gotten a treasure and was studying it in his own study, as if there was no one around. When Luocchio walked towards the crowd, and almost bumped into the crowd, the guests tacitly took the initiative to give way. But Luocchio quickly turned around and paced to the other side. When he came over, the guests here also took the initiative to give way. At this moment, Luocchio raised the treasure ball up to his level. As for the crystal chandelier on the ceiling of the hall, he seemed to want to see it more clearly. Song Ing looked at Luocchio nervously. Could it be that he couldn't see anything? Wouldn't he have to admit that he was an idiot in front of so many people? Even though her feelings towards Luoccio's existence were somewhat complicated, and she didn't even know how to face this descendant of the Song family who was like her, Song Ing didn't want Luocchio to be ridiculed at this moment. Even if he was going to be ridiculed, she should be the one taking the initiative. There doesn't seem to be enough light. Luocchio shook his head. The downtrodden man just stood there casually with a smile on his face. This time, he didn't speak up like Song Ing. At this time, Luocchio suddenly thought of something. He picked up the treasure ball and quickly walked to the window. Under the sunlight, he began to carefully examine the treasure ball. But there was no movement for a long time. "How is it, you really can't see anything?" Song Ing quickly walked to Luoccio's side and asked in a low voice. "What do you want me to see?" Luocchio asked in a low voice. Song Ing glared at him and lowered her voice again. "This matter is a bit strange, that guy might have a problem. But there are so many people here, just pretend to see something and casually say a few words. Afterwards you can ask that guy clearly. My state just now was a bit absent-minded. I don't know how to describe it, but it was a bit strange. But I definitely won't allow you to lose face of the Song family in front of outsiders." Luocchio smiled slightly and suddenly moved the treasure ball in his hand and put it under the sunlight. The moment the treasure ball came in contact with the sunlight, it seemed to brighten a bit. "It's not good for me to say what I saw, let everyone see it together," Luocchio said seriously. "Today is a beautiful thing, so let's share it." Because the treasure ball absorbed the sunlight, it seemed to be plated with a layer of colorful shell. It suddenly refracted countless rays of light, like a rainbow. In an instant, wherever the refracted rays of light shone, countless sceneries appeared. The magnificent sea, the pure and unpolluted islands, the magnificent and majestic waterfalls, the pavilions and towers, the mountains and rivers. They were like a real world that was seamlessly pieced together. The guests could even see the sparkling blue waves of the sea blown by the sea breeze, see the unceasing flow of the waterfall, see the swaying leaves of the palm trees, and also see the butterflies fluttering in the fields of flowers. It was like being in a strange country. The down-and-out man's expression was a bit stiff at this moment. He slightly opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but at the same time, he slightly frowned. When Luocio put away the treasure ball, those rich and beautiful sceneries instantly disappeared. A lady even let out a sound because she was unwilling to part with it, full of yearning. When everyone looked at the treasure ball, their gaze had already changed. Women who loved beautiful things by nature even had a burning desire to possess them in their eyes. Men were re-evaluating its value. Luocio returned to the down-and-out man and gave the treasure ball to him. It's really a great thing. No matter if it's really the condensation of the tears of a magical fish, or a powerful craftsman who used uncanny craftsmanship to put all these sceneries into it, it's good. The down-and-out man suddenly smiled and took the treasure ball back from Luocio's hand. He walked to the place where he sat at the beginning, the corner of the wall, where there was an old handbag. Under the gaze of everyone, the down-and-out man put the treasure ball back into the handbag and picked it up. He even put on a black top hat. That's why I said this is the only, one-of-a-kind thing in the world. It's really hard to choose whether to sell it or not. No matter how much it costs. I want it. I want it too. You must sell it to me. The guests flocked to him in an instant and turned into a sea of people, drowning the down-and-out man in an instant. Among the crowd, the down-and-out man could only see that the black top hat was protected by his hands and then moved with difficulty. As for what they were talking about, no one could hear clearly. Which treasure ball is real? Song Ying still felt it was inconceivable. Haven't you already seen it? Luocio asked back. Song Ying frowned. How did you know to put it under the sun? Luocio thought for a while and said, I just tried. For example, those who got the secret letter in the novel, but didn't know how to open it, they would also try to roast it with fire or soak it in water. Well, it's probably like that. Song Ying looked up very seriously and looked straight at Luocio's eyes. After a while, she said, Why don't you go to heaven? You have to pay the price for going to heaven. Luocio shook his head. Actually, it's not bad to walk on the ground. Master Chiu missing, that man is gone. Unexpectedly, Gan Hong suddenly interrupted the fight between Song Ying and Luocio. Song Ying looked back and saw that the guests who surrounded the down-and-out man were looking around blankly. They couldn't find that guy's trace and were searching everywhere. Song Ying frowned and waved her hand. Soon, a woman dressed like an intellectual quickly walked to Song Ying. She was Song Ying's secretary in the office. She couldn't command Gan Hong now, so she had to call the secretary over. She didn't really think that Luocio was the one who carried her bag. When the secretary came over and saw Luocio, she was startled and quickly nodded, showing a grateful expression. Song Ying noticed and just said casually, Su Mei, look for that man just now. The thing in his hand is good. I'll see if I can buy it and give it to the old man. Yes, Miss Ying. Su Mei's secretary nodded quickly and left quickly. At this time, Gan Hong also asked Luocio, Master Chiu, do we need to look for him too? Look for him for what? Gan Hong asked curiously. That treasure, Master Chiu, don't you want it? Luocio said indifferently, If you want too many things, it will become endless. Since you've already seen it, isn't it good enough? Only memories will not be lost. Gan Hong was startled and looked at Luocio blankly. Is there something on my face? Luocio asked. Gan Hong shook her head. No, it's just that I suddenly feel that young master is very similar to a teacher in the village. Teacher? Luocio was interested. Gan Hong nodded and said, He's also Chinese. I don't know where father found him. But he can't see, we all call him Mr. Blind. He said something similar. Seems like you like this teacher very much. Luocio nodded. Otherwise, you wouldn't remember what he said. Mr. Blind did teach us a lot, but young master, don't misunderstand, this isn't like, it's respect. Gan Hong quickly said. Let's go over there and take a look. Luocio smiled. At this time, Song Ying walked over and glared at him. Don't run around. Okay. Luocio nodded. Song Ying suddenly swallowed all the words she wanted to say. Why isn't he following the rules? At this time, Luocchio walked to the side of a servant in the manor and said, "Can you open all the windows in the hall? I feel a bit stuffy. There are quite a lot of people smoking here." The servant nodded. This request of the guest was not a big deal. Indeed, many people hated the smell of smoke. In fact, he also felt that the air here was indeed a little turbid, causing the fresh flowers that had just been moved here to lose their original fragrance. It was really a waste. "Okay, please wait a moment, I'll open it right away." The servant nodded politely. In the corridor, the down-and-out man looked back and found that no one was following him. Then, he leaned against a window in the corridor, took off his hat, and fanned himself a few times. After that, the down-and-out man suddenly put his leather bag on the window frame, opened the zipper, and then took out the treasure ball. He casually tossed it up and put it under the window, where the sunlight shone. He carefully looked at it, shook his head, and then directly threw the treasure ball out of the window. "Seems like there are more uninvited guests." The down-and-out man muttered and closed the window again. At this time, footsteps came from the front of the corridor. Not far away, a pale-faced woman wearing black gauze clothes and a gauze hat slowly walked over. Behind the woman was a cautious old man. The down-and-out man didn't move, but just leaned against the wall, waiting for the old man and the woman to come to him. "So fast, I thought you would be late," the down-and-out man suddenly said. This woman was the one who Luocchio and Gan Hong met in the courtyard. Even her eyebrows were white, suspected to have albinism. She said indifferently, "The weather is cooler, it's more convenient to travel, so I'm a bit early." The down-and-out man glanced at the wooden box in the woman's arms and suddenly reached out to touch it. Unexpectedly, the old man behind the woman quickly blocked the down-and-out man's hand with the black umbrella in his hand. The old man slightly shook his wrist, and the handle of the black umbrella suddenly bounced up. The umbrella rib was full of cold light. This was a sharp sword hidden in the umbrella, shining with silver light. "Mr. Longza, our miss doesn't like strangers approaching, please go away," the old man said indifferently. The down-and-out man. Mr. Longza shrugged, leaned back, and slowly said, 20 years ago, your father disappeared after drinking the red spider lily. 20 years later, you brought the remaining half-bottle of red spider lily. Do you believe Tushani's words, Elizabeth?" The woman with white eyebrows. Elizabeth casually glanced at Mr. Longza. "Then why did you bring your limbo?" "I didn't say I brought it." Mr. Longza smiled, casually picked up his leather bag and took it out. "If you don't believe me, I can let you check it." The old man used the black umbrella to block it, his eyes shining. "Deceiver of the Longza family, I'll say it again, please don't approach our Mississippi. Relax, relax, Mr. Amonst." Mr. Longza looked scared, squinting his eyes and said, "For us, it's very stressful to be stared at by a former holy knight of the Holy See. Especially when this former holy knight is holding a pure silver sword in his hand." The old man snorted coldly. Mr. Longza patted his leather bag, smiled and said, "Well, I'll go find someone else to chat, I won't disturb you." As he spoke, he walked past Elizabeth and Amand. But he quickly stopped and did not turn around. Instead, he quickly said, "Free information. Today, other than us, Tushani seems to have invited some other guests as well." Elizabeth and Amonst looked at each other, and Mr. Longza had already disappeared from the corridor. Elizabeth whispered, "Grandpa, be careful." Chapter 872. Lady Eve lived on the top floor of West Tower with her own servant, a young and beautiful girl named Bela. Lady Eve had just returned from outside. The servant opened the door for her. Lady Eve said casually, "Bela, I want to take a bath. Can you prepare some rose petals for me?" "Yes, ma'am." Bela left respectfully. The room was lavishly decorated. Lady Eve slowly walked to the dressing table and sat down. With gentle movements, she took out a small flat box from her bag and opened it. It was the folded handkerchief. Lady Eve slowly lifted the handkerchief and spread it open. The pure white handkerchief was stained with a little bit of blood that looked like plum blossoms. Lady Eve grabbed the handkerchief with both hands and brought it to her nose. She took a deep breath with an intoxicated look on her face. After a long time, Madame Eve put down her hand and sighed slowly. Then, she sighed again. Lady Eve folded the handkerchief again and put it back into the small box. Then, she put it back into the dressing table drawer. Lady Eve looked at herself in the mirror. She noticed that the ends of her hair were a little messy. She carefully tidied it up and even trimmed her eyebrows. Lady Eve stood up and walked to the window. She took out an exquisite box about 40 centimeters in size from the bedside cupboard. She pressed the ring on her finger into one of the grooves on the box and twisted it a little. Then, she heard the sound of some mechanism being activated and the box's lock was unlocked. Lady Eve opened the box. Inside was a similarly exquisite crystal bottle. The bottle was filled with a dark red liquid that was close to black. However, the liquid only filled half of the bottle. Lady Eve put her hand on the bottle stopper. She held it for a long time, but didn't pull it out. She shook her head. Then, she put the bottle back into the exquisite box and locked it again. At this moment, the maid, Bella, knocked on the door. "Madam, the petals are ready." Madame Eve put away the box, stood up, swung her dress, and opened the door of the room. Bella saw a touch of purple appear in front of her. She was a little dazed. Ma was always so beautiful. It was as if she hadn't changed at all since 5 years ago. Lady Eve was a legendary woman with many outstanding lovers in the British social circle. "Bella, am I beautiful?" "Yes, Ma am. You're the most beautiful." Bella's eyes were infatuated. Lady Eve smiled and asked again, "Am I more beautiful than the woman holding the cat in the study?" "Yes, I'm more beautiful than her." Bella's voice gradually calmed down, without any fluctuation. Lady Eve stroked Bella's cheek. She touched Bella's youthful and compact skin. Then, she took Bella's hand and gently pulled her into the room. "Come on, help me change my clothes." At this time, the heavy wooden door slowly closed. It seemed that only the clear and melodious laughter could be vaguely heard. Squeak! Ouyang Jie thought. Then, he led Zhong Luoyue into the room, the study. The study of the god of gamblers, Tushini. Before Ouyang Jie and Zhong Luoyue came in, Tushini had already changed his clothes. Other than the strange appearance of the white half-mask, there was a scholarly air about him. They had just come back from the grape field outside. Tushini directly asked Ouyang Jie and Zhong Luoyue to sit at the desk. "Tell me, you said you have something to discuss with me. What is it?" Ouyang Jie said bluntly, "Master, let me introduce some more to you. This is Miss Zhong Luoyue. She is currently the boss of the Four Seasons Group, and also the owner of the Four Seasons Casino. This time, she wants to see you." Tushini glanced at Zhong Luoyue. Zhong Luoyue said seriously, "Mr. Tu, I wonder if you're willing to return to the martial arts world?" Tushini didn't seem to be surprised by Zhong Luoyue's intentions. After hearing her words, he said indifferently, "Well, it's not bad to be direct and not beat around the bush. But since you've successfully recruited Ajay, and he's already won last year's competition for you, why do you still want to invite me?" Zhong Luoyue said calmly, "Because I don't want to see the day when I meet Mr. Tu at the gambling table. Mr. Tu, you should know that no one is willing to lose, and there's even a possibility of losing. I've already washed my hands of gambling." Tushini shook his head. "It's the world of the young now. Ajay has already learned all my skills, and I've also taught him all the gambling skills I know. My era has passed, but Ajay's era has just begun. He's still young, and in the future, he'll have the ability to create better skills than mine." Tushini said this with a smile. "Miss Zhong, you've already won a place for your family in the gambling world at such a young age. You're not inferior to men, so you should be a brave person. Why can't you think this through?" "It's a very simple question. I hope Mr. Tu can answer me," Zhong Luoyue suddenly asked. Tushini made a please gesture. Zhong Luoyue said, if you were to bet with Ajay right now, who would win? Ouyang Jie looked at Zhong Luoyue in surprise. Obviously, he didn't expect Zhong Luoyue to ask such a direct question. Between the master and the disciple who learned the master's skills, who was more outstanding? Ouyang Jie looked at his master, Tushini. Can I win against my master now? He even asked himself this question subconsciously. Tushini shook his head. I've already said that I've washed my hands of gambling, and I won't get involved in the gambling world anymore. Even if it's Ajay, I won't gamble again. Miss Zhong, I know what you're worried about, but I can promise you that there's no such person as the god of gamblers, Tushini, in this world. There's only a guy hiding in this small vineyard, leading a drunken life. After saying this, Tushini directly stood up. It's getting late, I'll go to the wine cellar to prepare. Miss Zhong, if you're interested in my wine, you can also come to our wine tasting party. Tushini walked to the door of the study room. Zhong Luoyue suddenly said, Mr. Tu, please wait. How's the wealth of my Zhong family in Mr. Tu's eyes? The peak of the aristocratic families is nothing more than this. Tushini said indifferently. I can promise you anything. Zhong Luoyue stood up. I can promise you anything that the Zhong family can do. Time. Tushini suddenly turned his head and looked at her. At least you can't promise me time. Time. Or the time that has disappeared. Tushini nodded. Even if you gather all the wealth in the world, you can't buy back a second that has passed. Zhong Luoyue frowned. Could it be that there's nothing that can move you, Mr. Tu? Yes, we can't do what you want, but I'm afraid no one in the world can do it. Mr. Tu, I hope you can think about it carefully because I really came with great sincerity. Ouyang Jie hurriedly said, Master, Miss Zhong did come with great sincerity. She came in person and escaped a disaster to reach the manor. Now she's still lying in the hospital. Go ahead. Tushini waved his hand indifferently and directly left. Ouyang Jie sat down a little discouraged, but Zhong Luoyue didn't sit down. He didn't see any angry expression on this woman's face, but he didn't know what she was thinking. Ouyang Jie thought for a while and broke the silence. Actually, this is good. Master even rejected me, so it's impossible for him to agree to anyone else. At the very least, we can't get it, and no one else wants to get it. Except for my master, I'm confident that no one can beat me. Zhong Luoyue suddenly said, Didn't you lose to a layman not long ago? Ouyang Jie was taken aback, then smiled bitterly and said, That time we gambled on luck, and there was no skill involved. I lost, and it can only be said that my luck wasn't as good as his. It wasn't a problem with my skills. Zhong Luoyue didn't comment and looked at an oil painting hanging on the wall of the study. In the oil painting, a woman hugged a white fluffy cat and sat quietly on the edge of the window. Zhong Luoyue couldn't help but exclaim, What a beautiful woman, who is she? Karen. Ouyang Jie also looked at the oil painting and seemed to be lost in his memories. Finally, he said, Her name is Karen. I don't know her specific name, because even this name was heard from my master's mouth. I only knew it when he occasionally said this name when he was drunk. She is your master's wife? Zhong Luoyue said seriously. Ouyang Jie shook his head. My master has always been single, and everyone in the manor knows it. Even Lady Eve can only be said to be my master's confidant. I feel that Lady Eve is a little interested in my master, but it may just be because of Lady Eve's natural disposition. So, you haven't seen this woman named Karen? Zhong Luoyue nodded. Ouyang Jie blinked and asked somewhat rascally, I used to look at this oil painting every day, doesn't that count as seeing it? But Zhong Luoyue didn't roll her eyes at him, which disappointed Ouyang Jie. She just said, Let's go. Ouyang Jie was startled, and 2 fingers passed in front of Zhong Luoyue's eyes. You mean, we're going back now? No, it's rare to come here. Although your master hasn't agreed yet, at least we can see the legendary Daylily series. Zhong Luoyue took out a crystal ball with numbers embedded in it from her pocket and looked at it. Didn't they say that a lucky person will be born? Yes, you like drinking red wine. Ouyang Jie smiled and then bent his arm. Then let's go. Zhong Luoyue finally rolled her eyes at him. Perhaps for young talents, coming here would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Even those young and beautiful girls were a rare platform for him. But Luoqiu didn't like to socialize, except for his guests. Therefore, he didn't take the initiative to contact anyone in this most suitable place for communication. Then, it seemed that the only way to pass the time was to appreciate the various decorations in the manor or the oil paintings hanging on the wall. For example, Luoqiu stopped in front of an oil painting at this time. The oil painting hanging on the wall was very large, depicting a male aristocrat. Looking at the blurriness of the painting, it seemed to have some history. Ganhong didn't know why Master Qiu could be so entranced by this painting. She felt that such a portrait was very ordinary. As a human, it was more because she learned all kinds of useful skills that could bring her survival skills. Appreciating oil paintings was a complete waste of time for the children in the village. His name is Baron Fernandez. At this time, a young man walked slowly from behind. Hearing this, Luoqiu turned around to take a look. This young man was very handsome. His hands were casually inserted into the pockets of his trousers, and a cynical smile hung on his face. Blonde hair and blue eyes, with a pair of beautiful eyes. Baron Fernandez? Luoqiu repeated this name. The handsome man walked to Luoqiu's side, raised his head and looked at the portrait hanging on the wall. He nodded and said, "He is the original owner of this manor. Of course, I'm talking about 200 years ago." Luoqiu nodded and looked at the portrait of Baron Fernandez again. At this time, the handsome young man suddenly said, "There is actually a legend about this Baron Fernandez." Saying this, the handsome man suddenly looked at Luoqiu. Legend has it that this Baron Fernandez is a monster that lives on blood. Lives on blood. Luoqiu pondered for a moment and said, "Generally speaking, people tend to imagine such people as vampires." Yes. The handsome man smiled charmingly. "That's generally what people think, but the rumors haven't been proven. But one thing is true, and that is that this Baron Fernandez can't come in contact with the sun. Once the sun shines on his skin, he will feel pain. This is something that everyone in Baron Fernandez's family knows. They kept this secret, but for some reason, this secret was eventually found out by outsiders. You know, people's fear of the unknown can sometimes destroy a lot of things. What happened to this Baron Fernandez later?" Luoqiu asked curiously. The handsome man turned to look out the window, then stretched out his finger and pointed at a tall tower in the castle, saying, "That's the tallest building in the East Wing." At that time, Baron Fernandez was hung on that tower by the people of his territory, exposed to the direct sunlight. I heard that he wailed in pain for a whole day and finally died. Luoqiu glanced at it. If that was the tallest tower in the east, then opposite it was the tower in the west. It seemed to be the residence that Lady Eve once mentioned. The handsome man walked in front of Luoqiu, slightly taller than Luoqiu. "What, you don't believe it?" Luoqiu didn't deny it, but asked instead, "Do you believe it?" The handsome man came closer and whispered, "I believe it, and I believe that you also believe it." Why? Chapter 873. Or, it's almost inaudible. The handsome man added softly, "A normal adult male's heartbeat should be 60 to 100 beats per minute. Don't you think yours is a little less? Once or twice." Luoqiu glanced at him, then suddenly looked at Ganhong. "Can you get me a glass of water?" "Okay." Ganhong nodded quickly. Although it was strange, she still obeyed obediently. The handsome man watched Ganhong leave, then said, "It seems that this beautiful lady doesn't know anything. For now." Luoqiu answered casually, "Maybe there will be a chance in the future. My name is Haidazir. Nice to meet you, Mr. Non-Human." Haidazir stretched out his hand at this time. Luoqiu lightly shook the other party's hand. As the club's boss, for Luaccio, who did not like to interact with too many people before, the last thing he was afraid of now was shaking hands with people. So, you may be the same kind of person as Baron Fernandez. To be exact, we are from the same family. Haidazir said seriously, my surname is Fernandez, the descendant of the castle's owner. But the current owner of this castle is Mr. Tu? Luaccio seemed to be more interested. Ever since my ancestor, Baron Fernandez, died, this castle has been left empty, said Hidasil slowly. But I've never seen anything like this before. In modern times, it was included in the state's property and was finally bought by Tushini. You are taking the initiative to approach me? Luaccio asked. Haidazir said very naturally. Like the scene before that caused the treasure ball to produce a magnificent scene, I think it's quite difficult to not notice you. The person holding the so-called treasure ball, we call him Long Zhe, is a fraud master, good at using mental power to hypnotize others. Deceiving people is his hobby. You've ruined his good deed, so you'd better be careful. I can't watch my companions be bewitched either. Luaccio shook his head. Perhaps before the holidays, he would not do it and would only watch silently. But if he had a thought in his mind, he would do it without hesitation. He would feel his thoughts at every moment. No matter what, I've already warned you. Hidasil shrugged and then sighed. You don't look like a vampire. What kind of non-human are you? I don't know either, Luaccio shook his head. This may be the answer that I need to work hard to find in the future. Hidasil did not mind such an answer. He just nodded in agreement. The world is a big place. There are many who don't know why they are extraordinary. Some people are born with it, while others are born with it. It is also possible that they are the descendants of a race that disappeared in history, but they do not know about it. There are even people who live forever because of the fountain of undying. There are also people who live by blood. Luaccio looked at Hidasil and said, Were you invited by Tushini or something else? Hidasil asked curiously. I can't help but be curious. Because among the people who were invited this time, you are the only one I don't know. As for the other guys, we know each other very well. So I'm very curious, what is your purpose in coming here? It's just a coincidence. Luaccio told the truth. He was indeed pulled here by Song Ying. Of course, it was also Father Song's intention. Although after arriving at the manor, he found that it was not as simple as he thought it would be. Luaccio, who had long been used to encountering strange things, had long learned to adapt to the situation. I'll believe you for now. Hidasil looked at Luaccio again and then smiled. You are very mysterious. You always have an ability to make people believe, or should I say, charm? I hope I won't disturb you, Luaccio said with a harmless expression. Perhaps it's best to leave now. Luaccio glanced at Song Ying, who was not far away and was once again caught in the trouble of socializing. He could only shake his head at Hidasil. Hidasil had a look of pity and seemed to be helpless. Finally, he said, At least, I hope you can stay by my side. Of course, this does not mean that I need to monitor you. It's just that if you are by my side, they will not be hostile to you for no reason. Following who is not the same as following? Luaccio readily agreed. Moreover, Hidasil seemed to be a person who liked to tell stories. Luaccio was a person who liked to listen to stories, so why not? Hidasil smiled with satisfaction. You seem to rarely show yourself. Rarely come into contact with our world. Luaccio looked at him, puzzled. Hidasil said, Non-humans hide in human society and have many things to worry about. In this world, there are always those who claim to be righteous or those who have inherited ancient traditions who like to hunt non-humans. When you walk outside, it's best to disguise yourself. For example, keep your heartbeat in the range of a normal person as much as possible. For example? Luaccio blinked. Hidasil said very warmly, Oh, Luaccio, my new friend, I am happy to give you more reminders so that you can better walk in this dangerous world. Come, let me teach you some life skills as a non-human. Let me tell you. Citasil very naturally put his hand on Luacio's shoulder. He was really a very warm-hearted person. In the distance, Song Ying, who had just escaped the siege of a group of old men, happened to run into Gan Hong, who was walking back with a cup of water. She shouted, "Gan Hong, who is that person? She seems to have a very good relationship with that guy." Gan Hong instantly recognized the difference between this Miss Song Ying and that guy. She found it funny that Song Ying's mouth was so blunt. However, she still quickly replied, "I don't know." She took the initiative to get to know him. It seems they have already chatted. Song Ying looked at him suspiciously. She felt that this man with blonde hair and blue eyes was really worthy of the word handsome. In some popular terms, he was the so-called beauty of the age. As for Luacio was just so. I say, Gan Hong. Song Ying suddenly stared at Gan Hong seriously. My grandfather gave you to Luacio. I know what he meant. I also know very well what you learned in the village. I am very curious. Have you not attacked in the past few days? Being asked, Gan Hong felt somewhat embarrassed. Actually, she had attacked before this young Master Luacio came to my humble abode. Gan Hong could only mumble, Master Chiu is more decent. Song Ying was stunned. She recalled the behavior of the Luacio she knew. At this time, she frowned as she looked at Luacio and the blonde handsome man chatting happily. She could not help but mutter, this guy, could he be gay? Song Ying felt that this thought was very scary. However, the more she thought about it, the more she felt it was possible. Otherwise, which man would not touch a beauty like Gan Hong? Also, the last time she drove in the middle of the night, this guy actually sat beside her and waited for more than 2 hours. He was even folding paper cranes. What a sissy! Why Lisabeth and Amonst did not directly enter the banquet hall where the guests were. Instead, they stayed in another quiet room. Why Lisabeth's appearance was quite special. It was easy to attract the attention of others. Obviously, whether it was her or the old man Amonst, they were not happy to see this scene. Amonst looked very old and abnormally thin, as if he was withered. From time to time, he would cough twice. He was looking at his pocket watch, silently calculating the time. Suddenly, the door of the room opened. It was Lady Eve who came in. After taking a bath and changing clothes, Lady Eve had a faint floral fragrance on her body. Lady Eve smiled and looked at Lisabeth and Amonst in the room. She nodded politely. Long time no see, Mr. Amonst. How are you? Thank you for your concern, Amonst replied coldly. Lady Eve came with a small exquisite box and a small folding fan in her hand. She walked to the sofa and sat down. She opened the folding fan and fanned herself leisurely. Lady Eve suddenly opened her small mouth and exhaled softly. Lisabeth, who was sitting opposite her, was suddenly shocked. A red light flashed in her eyes and her expression suddenly became somewhat uncomfortable. She hugged the wooden box with both hands and tightened her grip. Lady Eve, bullying a junior, is this how a noble should behave? Amonst looked at Lady Eve coldly. You know that this child has never sucked blood before. Why are you using the smell of blood to stimulate her? Lady Eve closed her folding fan and covered her mouth. Is that so? After so many years, why Lisabeth is still so pure? It's really moving. Amand snorted coldly at this time, gently knocking the long black umbrella on the floor. The old man did not stop Madame Eve, but just stared straight ahead and said coldly, I once made a vow, anyone who wants to hurt this child, no matter who it is, I will not let them go. I'm so scared, so scared. Lady Eve patted her chest. Mr. Amonst, one of the descendants of the great 12 holy knights of the Round Table. But, at such an old age, how long can you protect this child? Amonst was obviously also a strong talker. He sneered and his murky eyes suddenly burst out with a ruthless look. I only need one sword to kill a vampire after the 10th generation. With a flick of his wrist, the bright silver blade instantly shot out from the black umbrella. The reflected silver light directly pierced Lady Eve's eyes. Lady Eve dodged the light in fear and then smiled. It was a very pleasant conversation. Grandpa, I'm fine now. Why, Elizabeth's face looked better now, and she said softly. Amance then put the blade back into the umbrella, and did not look at Lady Eve any more. Not long after, the door was opened again. This time, it was Tuscany who walked in. He looked around the room and said, "Only the two of you?" Elizabeth said, "Mr. Two, I met Mr. Longza. He must have arrived long ago, but he hasn't come yet." "Why, Elizabeth?" When Tuscany saw Elizabeth, a smile appeared on his face and he praised, "You're still so beautiful." Why, Elizabeth lowered her head, looking a little shy. After that, Tuscany also greeted Amance, and the old man was obviously more polite to Tuscany, but not very friendly. Not long after, even before Tuscany sat down, Mr. Longza, who was carrying an old leather bag, slowly pushed open the door and walked in. He also looked at the people present and smiled. Looks like I'm not the last one here." Tuscany said at this time, "Longza, I heard that you caused a small commotion in the banquet hall." Mr. Longza laughed. "Old friend, you know what I'm interested in. Besides, from the results, I didn't cause any trouble, did I? Besides, if you want to say that I'm not a good friend, old friend, I think you're the one who's not being nice enough, right? It seems that, other than us, you also invited some other people here?" Lady Eve also looked at Tuscany at the same time and asked softly, "What's the background of that young man?" Tuscany said indifferently, "I heard that he came with the eldest daughter of the Song Dynasty group. I probably know the purpose of this songing. It's nothing more than inviting me to come back and take charge of the Song family's casino." "Then what about the young guy in the vineyard? What's his background?" Lady Eve asked again. Tuscany shook his head. "I don't know. He's indeed a little mysterious, but I don't feel any malice from him, and he doesn't seem like someone who would cause trouble." Lady Eve narrowed her eyes. "These behemoths at the top of the human aristocratic families, even we have to avoid them. It's rumored that the Song family has a private army comparable to the regular army, and they're not to be trifled with. Now there's one more unknown. Tuscany, I thought you didn't plan to change the date? The hunting day is our tradition. If we change the date, it'll tarnish our honor." Mr. Ryuzawa laughed at this time. "It seems that the person you met and I met is the same person. One thing is for sure, he's not the same kind as us, and definitely not from our sworn enemy, the werewolves. Speaking of which, I haven't drunk non-human blood for a long time. I wonder what it tastes like." Unexpectedly, Amance, who was sitting at this time, suddenly sneered. "Humph, how interesting. A group of guys who can't even walk for a few hours under the sun and only know how to hide in the corner to play tricks, talking about how powerful they are. What honor! They're just rats in the sewers." Mr. Ryuzawa was not angry, but he sneered back. "I wonder which paladin is now serving these rats in the sewers. Elizabeth is different from you." Amance stared coldly at Takizawa. Mr. Ryuzawa and Amance seemed to be at loggerheads as soon as they met, and both sides seemed to be at loggerheads. Seeing this, Lady Eve suddenly said, "You guys, has anyone seen Hydasir? It's already past the agreed time, why hasn't he gathered yet?" Tuscany said, "He has already arrived, don't worry about him, he will naturally appear after the start." Lady Eve nodded, and Mr. Ryuzawa shrugged and said, "That guy probably has a new boy toy in mind. There are a few beautiful young men today, they should be to Hydasir's liking." Amance said, "Lady Eve, Mr. Ryuzawa, Hydasir, Elizabeth, and you, Tuscany, there's only one left. That woman, is she not coming today? The woman who will bring you eternal life, Karen." Tuscany said indifferently, "It's the same whether she comes or not. Let's go." Yin 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 yin. Chapter 874. The manor was basically the same as it was before. There was a tall tower on the east and west side of the manor. At this time, Kim was walking on the spiral stone stairs that led to the top of the west tower. The top floor of the tower was where Lady Eve lived. Kim was very tall and had the image of a Shandong man. He soon arrived at the door of Lady Eve's room. He didn't immediately go in or knock on the door. He just waited in front of the door for a while. His hearing was actually very good. As a gambler, he was once known as the gambling demon. Naturally, he had undergone special hearing training. In fact, Kim believed that his hearing was absolutely top-notch, and his gambling skills were also at the peak. But many years ago, he finally lost to Tushini. In the end, he cut off one of his fingers and became a butler of Tushini's manor. He knew that he would never be able to win against Tushini because it was impossible for an ordinary person to win against him, even if the ordinary person had reached the limit. There was still no movement in the room. Only then did Uncle Jean take out a key and open the door. He didn't stay in the room, but went straight to the bathroom. There was still some mist left on the mirror, making it hazy. The residual humidity and heat in the bathroom would make people feel a little uncomfortable on a hot day. Uncle Jean was already sweating a lot as he climbed the stairs of the tower. He frowned and looked at the bathtub full of rose petals. At this time, there was a woman lying in the bathtub. Her name was Bela. Kim remembered this name because Bela was originally a maid in the manor. Later, Lady Eve took a fancy to her and from then on, she followed Lady Eve. In fact, over the years, Lady Eve came to the manor many times as a guest. Every time, she would choose a young girl to be her attendant. Kim walked into the bathtub. The rose petals almost covered the surface of the bathtub, like a red carpet for Bela. She just stuck her head out, closed her eyes, and had a dreamy smile on her face. There were 2 small holes on her neck. Bela was motionless. Kim put his finger on Bela's neck and then shook his head. Kim directly reached into the water and carried Bela out of the bathtub. The moment she got up, her body was still warm from the water. She didn't look like a dead person at all. Her skin was still so warm and soft. Maybe she just fell asleep. Another one. Butler Kim covered Bela's body with a white bedsheet and left with her in his arms. For so many years, he had dealt with this kind of thing 2 or 3 times a year. He had long gone from being shocked at the beginning to not being surprised at all. In truth, he was waiting for a chance to turn himself into them. Generally, we all call them as exorcists. There was no doubt that Hidesil was a talkative gentleman, at least so far. Luocio didn't find anything wrong with Hidesil from his appearance and behavior. Of course, it was limited to the current preliminary contact. Because they were talking about some non-human issues, after Gan Hong came back with water, she was sent away by Luocio again. This time, she went to get some snacks. Luocio was raised by Miss Maid of the club and had the habit of having afternoon tea every day. So Gan Hong was very busy. Exorcists. Luocio drank a mouthful of water. Hidesil gave him a personal feeling that his physical ability was stronger than ordinary people. In addition, he should have some special racial abilities. Luocio had come into contact with non-human creatures that sucked blood. For example, the princess of the Xianyuan family. Of course, in terms of the power of the inhuman domain, Haidasir and Su Zijuan really couldn't be compared. The gap between the two was like the difference between an ancient king and a pauper, because Citisil was probably a vampire 10 generations later. The power of the vampire 10 generations later wasn't strong. Although they could maintain their youth, they were actually very fragile. Even so, if the source of the vampire was traced, the power of the first generation and the first generation was also quite strong. Of course, when Luocio made friends with someone or was interested in some species, he wouldn't simply use strength as the only criterion, because after tearing open the shell of great power, Luocio had another criterion for what was shining inside. Hidesil nodded at this time. Yes, exorcists or exorcists. They were first active in the Middle Ages. At that time, there were many legends of demons all over the world. The most common ones were the legends of vampires, werewolves, and the so-called evil witches. These should be familiar to him. But in fact, these three races are rarely exposed. So, exorcists are mostly exorcising evil spirit. Those who have lost their consciousness, or those who have merged due to resentment, are uncontrollable. It is very difficult to unify and manage them. Luoqiu nodded. Exorcists have their own organizations, right? Yes. Hidesil nodded. Generally speaking, there is a very loose exorcist association. Its existence is not to rule, but to provide information for exorcists. Of course, it is also a platform for exorcists to communicate with each other. In addition, within the circle of exorcists, there are several particularly large organizations that non-humans like us need to be careful of. For example, the Holy Cross Army. Holy Cross sounds like the Holy See. Yes. Hidesil smiled. During the Middle Ages, the Church had a period of hunting witches. The witches here generally refer to witches. During that time, many newborn witches were unable to resist the Holy Cross Army and were either captured or burned to death. Next is the Knights of the Round Table. At this moment, Hidesir dipped his finger in some clear water and drew a circle on the table. Circle symbolizes unity of one heart. In its heyday, the Knights of the Round Table had more than 150 knights. The most famous ones were, of course, the legend of King Arthur's 12 Holy Knights. But in fact, the Knights of the Round Table not only had powerful knights, but also the great wizard Merlin and his descendants. Then there is the Magician Association, Hidesil said seriously. But in many cases, magic and witchcraft can be distinguished. This provides a very good cover for witches and wizards. So, exactly how many witches and wizards are hidden in the Magician Association is a matter of unknown. On one hand, the magicians will also take on some tasks of exorcism. On the other hand, there are also wizards and some rare races. So, it is very difficult to determine the nature of the Magician Association. Luoqiu nodded. Although he had the ability to obtain information at will, in fact, many things were obtained for free, which was very pleasing. In fact, there is a special channel for obtaining information about the non-human world. Hidesil looked around and suddenly stretched his hand under the table. The moment he opened his palm, a furry basketball slowly emerged from the center of his palm. This furry fellow had a pair of wings and a small tail on its back. In addition, almost half of its body was a huge eye. Hidesil said, "We call it a messenger." It was originally a very rare sprite. Later, it was cultivated with brand new technology and has reached the stage where it can reproduce in large numbers. The advantage of a messenger is that it can update the non-human world situation in real time. You can think of it as a newspaper. The blue messenger opened its eyes at this time, completely revealing a huge ball. However, it did not look scary and was even somewhat cute. A faint light projected from the eyeball, and a panel appeared. It looked like the interface of a newspaper or magazine. There were words and pictures, and even the words had the option to select multiple languages. It was a little simple to call it a newspaper, but it was more like a website. Interestingly, the pictures on the screen were even moving. Good technology. Luoqiu tried to touch the interface projected by the elf messenger with his finger and found that it was indeed controllable. Hidesil smiled at this time and said, "In fact, these messengers are just child bodies. Above them, there are messengers that are the mother bodies. Each mother body can manage hundreds of thousands of child bodies, and the many mother bodies combine to form a huge processing terminal. As long as someone writes what happens to the mother body, then we, who hold the child bodies, can pay attention to the situation in the non-human world at any time. By the way, this kind of mind thing is a product of the Magician Association." Luoqiu was like a child who had gotten a new toy. He couldn't stop his hand as he stroked. Hidesil opened his mouth slightly at this time, and his eyes fell on Luoqiu's neck. He suddenly said, "My friend, this messenger is for you as a gift for our acquaintance. for me? Luaccio was a little surprised. Hidesil said generously, "This messenger is not something rare, but it is hard to find without a special purchase channel. But I don't lack this thing." "Then I'll buy it." Luaccio thought for a moment. "What should I pay for this? I mean, do you have a special currency? Wealth means nothing to us. Except for some guys who have a special interest in wealth, it is actually useless." Hidesil shook his head and said, "Generally speaking, we are popular in barter. Of course, this messenger can be bought with money, because the Magician Association also needs a lot of daily expenses. But I said it's for you, so it's for you. Do you know why I don't lack this thing?" "You can't be its developer," Luaccio joked. Hidesil smiled. "I don't have the knowledge to develop this kind of thing. But I am one of the agents of the messenger." "Agent? That is to say, he is also a businessman?" Luaccio thought for a while, then reached out and took out a black card from his pocket. The card was printed with 3 golden marks. "I don't have the habit of taking things for free. Since you are used to barter, then I will use this card to exchange. This card can—" Before Luaccio finished speaking, Hidesil picked up the black card with a look of surprise. "This is the mark on it. It can't be wrong. This is the Onyx Soul discount card. You? My friend Luaccio, how can you have such a precious thing? Do you know that a Onyx Soul discount card, with only 1 mark, can be sold at the price of 5 kilograms of mithril or the same value on the black market? Not to mention, this is a 3-mark one." Luaccio blinked. "This is indeed a discount card. But what the hell is the price of 5 kilograms of mithril on the black market? Do you not know the preciousness of this Onyx Soul discount card?" Hidesil asked curiously. At the same time, he pushed the black card back to Luaccio. However, his movements were somewhat slow and there was a look of reluctance in his eyes. Luaccio shook his head. "Whether it is precious or not is hard to say. However, this thing is of no use to me." "That is probably because you don't know how precious it is," Hidesil said. "According to legend, there is a mysterious place in this world. No matter who it is, as long as they step into this place, they can buy anything and fulfill any wish. Of course, the premise is that they must pay a price. This Onyx Soul discount card is one of the passes. There were 2 marks on the card, representing a 10% discount, a 20% discount, and even a 30% discount. Do you know how precious an opportunity it is for a person who wants to fulfill a certain wish to pay a lower price than the original price?" After saying that, Hidesil suddenly shook his head. "However, this mysterious place in legend has disappeared from the West for nearly 100 years. It is said that 100 years ago, the non-humans of the entire Western world besieged it because of a certain matter. After that, the Western non-human world went from a glorious era to a bleak one. It was as though gold had turned into scrap iron. Only after 100 years did it regain some vitality. However, there are also some who say that it did not disappear. It is just quietly waiting for the day when it will reappear. Thus, it was able to fetch a terrifyingly high price on the black market. Additionally, this thing is a consumable item, making it even more precious. How did I expect you to have one? Should I say that I am the boss of that place you mentioned? Forget it. If we meet again, I will just wear a mask. That way, it will not be awkward." Luaccio was someone who was afraid of being awkward. "I do not have any wishes that I want to fulfill." Luaccio smiled and said, "I obtained this thing by accident. It is just that the material is somewhat strange. That is why I kept it. Hidesil, thank you for sending me a messenger. Take this as my return gift." "Oh Luaccio, my good friend." Hidesil became even more enthusiastic. "You are such a generous person. I feel very honored. Today is a wonderful day to be able to meet you." He grabbed Luaccio's hand with both hands and said with incomparable sincerity, "This guy is so enthusiastic." Luaccio gently pulled back his hand. He was not used to such intimate contact with a man. Hidasil did not mind at the moment. However, as he quickly accepted the black card, he also took out a few rings. This onyx soul discount card is too precious. An ordinary messenger is simply not worth it. Then, Hidasir slowly said, "These rings are for you and your companions." Luocio looked at these rings. There were a total of 4. 3 were red and 1 was green. There seemed to be some other meaning. Chapter 875. What's the special purpose of this ring? Luocio picked up one of the red rings and looked at it. He heard Citisil say seriously at this time, "My friend, you gave me such a precious thing, such a precious friendship makes me feel shocked. So I decided to confess some things to you, so that we can be honest with each other." Luocio made an expression of listening to the rest of the story. Citisil said seriously at this time, "Do you know that for us there is a tradition of hunting day? A festival?" Luocio thought for a moment. "Something like that." Citisil nodded. "For us, hunting day is equivalent to a banquet. We usually restrain ourselves very much, but the impulses hidden in our bodies, if we suppress them for a long time without releasing them, will easily make us lose our way. Once we lose our way, we will lose our reason. In fact, in the many vampire legends that circulate in the world, most of them are lost vampires. Because they are unable to control themselves well, they will bring a fatal disaster to themselves. So, this hunting day." Luocio's heart stirred. "Today is the hunting day, and the guests here are the prey?" Citisil nodded. "They won't know afterwards, because we have a way to erase this part of their memory. Remember Long Zhe? He specializes in dealing with the aftermath. His deception can deceive the memories of most different people. So the wine tasting party is just a cover." Luocio looked around. Citisil said, "We need an environment where we can fully release our instincts. The taste of the blood of these pampered people is very good, rich in nutrients, and can bring us more vitality in the opening ceremony of hunting day. My friend, wear these rings, it can prevent you from being targeted by my companions. They are my personal mark. If you wear them, my companions will know that you are my guests, so naturally, they will not do anything to you." "Why are there 2 colors?" Luocio asked curiously. "Why would there be men and women?" Citacer asked in disdain. "All right." Luocio did not ask any more questions about the ring, but he obviously did not believe in the past so easily. Under Hidasir's eager gaze, Luocio put on the only green ring. After putting on the ring, Luocio did not feel anything wrong with it. Apart from having a little bit of Citisil's aura, this ring was actually just an ornament. Truth be told, if you could have taken your friend away when I was persuading you, you might have been able to avoid a panicked experience. But from the looks of it now, perhaps it's already too late. If we leave now, even I would find it difficult to bear the dissatisfaction of my companions." Luocio smiled. "Don't I already have your ring?" "Yes." Hidasir smiled, picked up the glass of champagne in his hand, and gently touched Luocio's glass. "My dear friend." He's still a little too enthusiastic. Luocio felt that something was wrong. "I hope your companions, those beautiful ladies, will not panic too much." Hidasir leaned back in his chair and swirled the champagne glass. "Originally, it would not take long for the guests here to be in a strange state. But later, you asked someone to open the window, so it's hard to say. I think the fragrance of these flowers is a little too strong." Luocio shook his head. Hidasir said, "These flowers are specially sent to the scene. They are a variant of the datura flower. The smell of the flowers can produce a hypnotic effect, causing people to fall into an illusion. After that, with Longz's personal ability, he can easily erase some unpleasant things. You don't know this and feel that these flowers are strange. Asking people to open the window, there's nothing to say." Hidasir said indifferently, "In fact, maybe this is better. If the guests are more awake, they will feel fear, despair, and so on. With these reactions, it should be able to stimulate some fellows to become more impulsive. Only, it will be more troublesome to deal with after that, and, generally speaking, it is not a big deal. Suddenly, the sound of a bell ringing could be heard. It was not loud, but it was enough for everyone present to hear it clearly. Everyone turned to look and saw that it was the manor's housekeeper, Uncle Kim. Uncle Kim was holding a bell in his hand and a small hammer. He looked around and said in a clear voice, "Dear guests, the last batch of wine for this year will be opened soon. Please follow me." The door opened and several of the manor's servants were ready to guide the many guests. Haidasir stood up and bent down. His hand gently pressed down on Luocchio's shoulder. His lips were almost touching as he whispered, "I also need to go make some preparations. Remember to ask your friend to put on the ring. Also, remember not to run around. Once it starts, there will be people in charge of inspection in the castle." Luocchio nodded and Haidasir drifted away. "What are you talking about? What is the background of that person?" Song Ing walked up to Luocchio. Beside her were Gan Hong and the female secretary, Su Mei. Hearing that, Luocchio casually said, "Actually, it's nothing. We just talked about some anecdotes. This gentleman is quite enthusiastic and talkative." Song Ing stared at Luocchio suspiciously. In fact, she had wanted to get between the two men for a long time. However, Song Ing was someone who knew how to look at the situation. It was not good to suddenly disturb them. Although it was her father who asked her to bring Luocchio here, she still had some grudges in her heart. She could not ignore it. "Is that really all?" Song Ing clearly did not believe it so easily. Luocchio suddenly said, "By the way, when do you plan to meet Tushini?" Song Ing said with a helpless expression, "It's all because of you. You clearly have a great opportunity, forget it. I have asked. Tushini is not seeing any guests now. I have been rejected at the door a long time ago. I will see if there is a chance to talk after the banquet starts. If there is no other way, I will wait for the people here to disperse before visiting him." With that, Song Ing suddenly frowned. "I just didn't expect that woman, Zhong Luoyue, to be here too. She even brought Ouyang Jie with her. He is the last disciple of Tushini. I am afraid that it will be much more difficult to persuade Tushini than imagined. By the way, since you have met Tushini, at least you have an impression of him. What kind of person do you think he is?" "He should be a wise elder." Luocchio thought for a while, but his eyes suddenly looked towards the window. This distraction was easily noticed by Song Ing. She followed Luoccio's gaze and found that Luocchio was just looking at the vase by the window. The flowers on the vase should have just been planted. They were very bright, but Song Ing was obviously not interested. "Let's talk about serious matters. Don't be distracted. What's so good about these flowers?" "There is a butterfly." Gan Hong's eyesight was much better. At this time, she reminded in a low voice, "It probably flew in from outside after the window was opened." It seemed that the sound of talking had disturbed the butterfly. It suddenly flew out of the petals and flew towards the window. But because of this, Song Ing could see its appearance clearly. Its whole body was purple-blue, and it had a metallic luster. Song Ing glanced at it and said angrily, "Isn't it just a blue flash butterfly? Nothing special." Luocchio said, "It is not a blue flash butterfly, but a Helena flash butterfly. Although they are both blue, they are of different breeds. You see, there is a circle of light white lines on its body, like a beautiful halo. When flying, the Helena flash butterfly's body is graceful, like a goddess flying under the blue sky. So the Helena flash butterfly is also called Flash Butterfly, the goddess of light." "Mr. Luo, you are really amazing. You know so many things." Su Mei listened and couldn't help but praise. But she seemed to have ignored Song Ying's existence. However, after saying this sentence, Su Mei regretted it, because Song Ing was glaring at her at this time. "Actually, I read it in books," Luocchio said indifferently. "It's the first time I see the real thing. I am asking you about Tushini, don't interrupt." When Song Ying was fierce, she actually had breasts. She puffed out her chest high, like a female leopard running on the grassland. Luoqiu suddenly smiled and said, "Then I will take you to see Mr. Tuesday, you? Now?" Song Ying looked surprised. Luoqiu smiled but didn't say anything. He walked straight to a side door of the banquet hall. Song Ying glanced at Gan Hong and saw that she was also puzzled at this time, so she had to quickly follow. "Everyone, please follow the footsteps of the servants and try to keep quiet and order." In front of the entrance to the cellar, Uncle Kim reminded all the guests, and the guests also walked slowly and obediently, without any signs of rushing in. "Ajay, come here." But at this time, Uncle Kim suddenly called Ajay over. He and Zhong Luoyue were actually in the banquet hall. At this time, he glanced at Zhong Luoyue and took her to Uncle Kim. "Uncle Kim, what's the matter?" Uncle Kim said at this time, "Ajay, your master is looking for you. Don't go in first, go to the study and wait for him." Now? Ajay was stunned and then puzzled. "I just met my master in the study. What can happen?" Uncle Kim shook his head and said, "I don't know. This is what your master asked me to pass on to you. Go and take a look." Ouyang Jie hesitated and glanced at Zhong Luoyue. Zhong Luoyue said indifferently, "You go, I can go down first." "Well, I'll be back soon." Ouyang Jie nodded. After greeting Uncle Kim, he quickly walked against the crowd. "I hope you have a good time." Uncle Kim smiled at Zhong Luoyue, a very loud smile. Zhong Luoyue nodded and followed the crowd down the stairs to the cellar. Song Ying felt that Luoqiu said that he would take her to see Tu Shini was probably not reliable, because along the way, the four of them had come to a deserted corridor, which was not the way to the cellar at all. Luoqiu even casually opened the doors of different rooms in the corridor. Like a customer who didn't choose what he liked, he directly left. Finally, when Luoqiu opened the fourth door, Song Ying couldn't help but ask, "Are you done?" "Here it is." Luoqiu nodded at this time and went directly into the room, and asked Song Ying and the others to go in together. This room was decorated like a living room, spacious and bright, and there was a very comfortable sofa. Luoqiu looked at the three of them and said, "Sit down first, just wait for a while." "Will Tu Shini really come?" Song Ying frowned. But seeing that Luoqiu had already sat down first, she was unwilling in her heart, but had to sit down obediently. Luoqiu took out the tea set on the table and began to make black tea. Not long after, he poured a cup of fragrant black tea for Gan Hong, Song Ying and Su Mei. "The banquet is about to start, I'm not in the mood to drink this. What's your purpose in bringing me here?" Song Ying was already impatient. She looked at the time. "Are you lying to me? What are you planning to do?" "To moisten my throat." Luoqiu said softly, "I'll tell you. I'm not drinking." Song Ying snorted coldly. Luoqiu just looked at her, which made Song Ying irritated, and she had an impulse to beat him up. She was so angry that she directly picked up the teacup, drank half of it, and then threw it back. "I've drunk, say it." Seeing that Gan Hong and Su Mei had also drunk, Luoqiu said slowly, "Because it should be safer here." "Safer? What do you mean?" Song Ying frowned. Suddenly, she felt her head becoming somewhat heavy. She subconsciously shook her head, wanting to sober up. However, it only took a moment for her to fall onto the sofa. Truth be told, the first to fall was Su Mei and the last to fall was Gan Hong. Only a moment had passed between them. Luoqiu waved his hand, allowing them to lie comfortably on the sofa. Then, he opened the room's windows so that the room would not feel stuffy. After that, he closed the door. Hydasil had said that by having them wear the rings, they could avoid any bad things. But in Luoqiu's opinion, the better way was to leave them here. As the holidays grew longer, Luoqiu gradually felt his emotions recovering. Gradually, he began acting like how he was in the past, avoiding as much trouble as possible. Who would bring a group of women to clear instance dungeons for no reason. After closing the door, Luoqiu gently nodded at the door. A light pattern rippled in front of the door, and the whole room was completely swept by this rippling wave. It's safe enough, have a good rest. In any case, you stayed up all night to read the document. Suddenly, a blue butterfly flew in through the corridor window and finally landed on Luocchio's shoulder. Luocchio stretched out his hand and the butterfly flew onto his finger. Are you going to follow me down to the cellar? Luocchio suddenly asked. The blue butterfly suddenly flew up and landed on Luoccio's shoulder. Then, follow me. Luocchio smiled. When Luocchio arrived at the cellar entrance, Uncle Kim had already begun to close the door. Am I late? Luocchio said apologetically. Uncle Kim suddenly noticed the green ring on Luoccio's finger. He opened his mouth slightly and suddenly said, Lucky fellow, go in. You should be the last. Thank you. Yen 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 yen. Chapter 876. Ouyang Jie was playing with a thick poker card which was the ace of spades. This was something he would do when he was bored. It was already past 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was now 3:07, but Tushini still hadn't arrived. The sound of the door opening came at this time. Ouyang Jie stood up at once. Mas? Uncle Jean. It was Uncle Jean, not Tushini. Ouyang Jie sat down helplessly. Uncle Jean came in with a kind smile. What's wrong? You don't like to see me? Ouyang Jie shook his head. How can it be? He remembered what happened after he was adopted and said with emotion, although Master adopted me, he usually didn't see anyone except for teaching me. Otherwise, he would study his vineyard. Uncle Jean, on the other hand, has been taking care of me. Ouyang Jie looked at Uncle Jean and said sincerely, I don't know who my biological parents are, but I don't feel unfortunate. Because I have two fathers later. One is my master. As the saying goes, a teacher for a day is a father for life. Master gave me a new life and made me. The other is you, Uncle Jean. You are like a father to me. You accompanied me when I grew up. Isn't it a waste to use the ability to coax women on me? Uncle Jean shook his head and walked to the wine cabinet in the study. He picked up a bottle of red wine, poured 2 glasses, and walked over. If you're not in a hurry, chat with me. Your master will be here in a while. Ouyang Jie didn't suspect anything. He smiled and took the red wine glass from Uncle Jean. They clinked their glasses and then took a sip. Ouyang Jie sighed. Master's red wine is still the best. Uncle Jean suddenly said at this time, Ajay, you specially brought Miss Zhong today. Is there any other meaning? Ajay smiled and said, What meaning can there be? She's my boss now. She wants to see Master and has given a strict order. It's not good for me to not bring her here, right? Uncle Jean shook his head slightly. You won last year's competition. With your achievements, even if you don't work for the Zhong family, all the powerful casinos in the world will fight for you. No one can force you to do something you don't like. You said that I've watched you grow up, and I'm like half a father to you. What's wrong? Even I can't tell the truth? Ouyang Jie sighed and put down the wine glass. After thinking for a while, he slowly said, Zhong Luoyue is a very special woman. After seeing her for the first time, I was sure of a few things. Uncle Jean, do you know? It's the feeling of wanting to get something, but not being able to bear to hurt it and even respecting it. Uncle Jean said indifferently, Zhong Luoyue is a member of an aristocratic family. The Zhong family can use you because of your talent, but it doesn't mean that the Zhong family is willing to accept you as a real member. Ouyang Jie was silent for a moment, and then said seriously, Even if I can reach Master's level, I still don't have a chance? Uncle Jean shook his head and said, No one can reach your master's level. Whether it's you or me. Ouyang Jie couldn't help but feel dejected. He smiled bitterly and said, An hour ago, Zhong Luoyue asked my master who would win if she and I had a bet now. To be honest, I didn't have any confidence at that time. On the contrary, Master was calm and composed. To be honest, you're right. I can't reach Master's level now. Uncle Jean didn't comment. Ouyang Jie drank another mouthful of wine to drown his sorrows. Don't think too much about the future. Uncle Jean comforted Ouyang Jie. Although she's a woman at the top of an aristocratic family, it's not like you can't reach her. Thank you, Uncle Jean. You're the only one who's good to me, Ouyang Jie yawned, seeming to be a little tired. He slowly lay on the table, narrowed his eyes and muttered, Master, why isn't he here yet? He looks at me, very cold, cold. Ouyang Jie completely closed his eyes. Uncle Jean reached out and patted Ouyang Jie's shoulder, saying softly, Have a good sleep. I'll help you fulfill your wish. Even the top of an aristocratic family can't resist the power of an extraordinary. One day, I'll become an extraordinary, and then. In front of a quiet stone room, Tushini held a brand new white candle in his hand. Behind him were Long Zhe, Elizabeth, and the others. After the stone room opened, Tushini didn't enter immediately. Instead, he let the others enter first. The door was still open because there were still some people who hadn't arrived yet. The interior of the stone room wasn't simple at all. It could even be said to be extremely luxurious, just like a dormitory in Midworld. However, it was unusually dark. Only the candle in Tushini's hand illuminated a small area. In front of a huge round table, there were 7 huge chairs. Tushini put down the candle and took the lead to sit in front of one of the chairs. The others also sat in the other chairs. Tushini looked around, then pressed his hand on the table in front of him. With a light press, a piece of the table was pressed down. It seemed to be a mechanism. At this time, the center of the table began to open. The opened mechanism slowly pushed out a long and narrow crystal bottle. Seeing the appearance of the crystal bottle, Lady Eve suddenly closed her folding fan, sat up straight, and whispered, Forget river. At this moment, Tushini made an inviting gesture. Elizabeth nodded, and Amonst, who was standing beside her, took the wooden box from her hand. After opening it, they took out a bottle of red wine that was less than half full. It was a very ordinary glass bottle, but Amonst carefully placed it in front of Elizabeth. Red spider lily. Lady Eve also opened the exquisite wooden box she brought and took out the crystal bottle inside. The style was different from Tushini's bottle. She whispered, 97. Next was Long Zhe. He opened his bag and took out a cylindrical transparent container. Mr. Long Zhe grabbed the container and waved it in front of the others. After chuckling, he placed it in front of himself. No choice. The Daylily series, Tushini brewed a total of 7 bottles. Including the Daylily, Forget River placed in the middle of the table, there were already 6 bottles that were known to everyone. As for the last bottle, no one here except Tushini had seen it before. Then, only Yellow Spring and 3 lives are left. Lady Eve smiled. Looks like I'm not late. The person who came late said with a frivolous smile. It was Hydasir. But he came empty-handed, which quickly attracted a few gazes. Hydasir pulled out a chair and sat down. Don't be nervous, I won't break the rules. Here it is. He drew something on the table with his finger. As his finger moved, dark red lines began to appear on the table. Finally, all the lines formed a complete pattern. Not long after, from this pattern, a ball-like creature began to jump out. It looked similar to the messenger, a furry yellow creature. Unlike the messenger, this creature had huge eyes and a big mouth. This yellow ball opened its mouth, revealing dense and sharp teeth. It was spitting out something. Yellow Spring. Hydasir held the object spat out by the ball in his hand. It was a goblet that seemed to be made of gold, but the mouth of the goblet had been sealed. However, the yellow ball spat out something else at this moment. This time, it spat out a box. Hydasir opened the box, which contained a diamond-shaped ruby-like crystal. Hydasir said again, and the last 3 lives. It's really 3 lives. Long Zhe and Lady Eve frowned at the same time. Why is it in your hands? Hydasir shrugged and said, This was sent to me by that woman and asked me to bring it here. As for why she didn't come, I don't know. Long Zhe and the others looked at each other, then looked at Tushini. Lady Eve smiled and said, No wonder you said it doesn't matter if she comes or not. It seems that you already knew that 3 lives is in Hydasir's hands? Tushini said indifferently, I had a correspondence with Hydasir before. Hydasir nodded at this time, proving that Tushini was not lying. Longzhe had a playful smile at this time. It's fine if she didn't come on the previous hunting days, but she didn't come today. Tushini, it seems that she really doesn't like you. Even if she gave you the embrace. Tushini ignored Longzhe's words and just said indifferently, since you've all brought it here, I'll go get ready. Tushini waved his hand, and the various containers placed in front of everyone began to move to the center of the table, then slowly descended and finally disappeared. Start your program. As Tushini spoke, his figure hid in the darkness. In the end, there was no movement, presumably he had disappeared. Hydasir was the first to stand up at this time. I already have someone I like, you guys take it easy. Longzhe and Lady Eve also got up at this time. Only Lisabeth was still sitting in her original place, and did not get up. Lisabeth said timidly, I'll just wait here. Longzhe just whistled and chuckled. My dear Lisabeth, I hope you can get through it this time. Why don't you enjoy this wonderful food with us? After you try it once, you'll feel foolish for persisting. Lisabeth just lowered her head and fiddled with the corner of her clothes, feeling slightly uneasy. At this time, Amon gently pressed Lisabeth's shoulder, then glanced at Longzhe and said indifferently, Get lost. Longzhe shrugged, but he left a step faster than Hydasir. Lady Eve followed behind. After that, Hydasir glanced at Lisabeth and Amon, smiled, then took out a small bottle and threw it at Amon. What's this? Amon frowned. Hydasir said indifferently, The Magician Association's new product this year, a kind of medicine to replenish physical strength. But you'll be very tired after taking it. Mr. Amon, it's up to you. Amon was silent for a while before nodding. Thank you. Hydasir said casually, You're welcome. I'm a dark merchant. One more friend and one more favor is not a bad thing for me. Lisabeth looked at Hydasir gratefully and said softly, May the glory of the true ancestor be with you, Mr. Hydasir. When everyone left and only Lisabeth and Amon were left, Lisabeth suddenly took a deep breath and pressed her hands on her chest, looking slightly nervous. Amon patted her shoulder gently. Has it started? Lisabeth shook her head. Not yet. I'm just a little nervous. Grandpa, She looked up and said seriously, If there's an accident, I hope you won't be merciful to me. I won't let anything happen to you. Amon held the long black umbrella tightly. I promised your mother, Rose, that I won't let you get lost. Lisabeth? Because he was the last to enter the passage to the cellar, when Luocio walked down the long stairs. He could not see the guests in front of him. He could only vaguely hear the voices coming from the front. This so-called cellar seemed to be much more complicated than he imagined. After coming down, he realized how huge it was. There were candlesticks hanging on both sides of the wall, which seemed to be used to guide the guests, but Luocio was a curious person, so he would take a few glances at the unlit passages. There's nothing there. At this time, Hydasir's voice came from the front. He appeared out of nowhere and was leaning against the wall. He seemed to have been waiting here for a long time. This place doesn't seem to be as simple as a cellar. Luocio asked casually. At this time, Citisil slowly walked over. This cellar was built by Baron Fernandez. The area is much larger than the castle on the ground. It was originally built for hiding. Hiding the soldiers here is the last resort to deal with the enemy. But interestingly, this place was built like a maze, but before Baron Fernandez was hanged, it was never used even once. Luocio nodded and looked at a dark mark in the corner. Under the illumination of the candlelight, the mark showed a dark brown color. It was probably blood. And now, it has become your hunting ground? It seems that you're the only one who came down. Hydasir suddenly asked. Luocio just nodded. Is there a problem? Not really. Haidasir smiled and said, "As long as you feel that there is no problem, I believe you should have arranged it." Luoqiu returned the remaining 3 rings to Haidasir. Haidasir reached out and took them back. Then, he looked at the butterfly on Luoqiu's shoulder that was docilely resting and spreading its wings. He asked curiously, "Radiant Goddess, a good breed. Where did it come from?" Luoqiu glanced sideways and said, "It should have flown in from outside. This little guy is quite interesting. After landing on me, it didn't leave." Haidasir stroked his chin and said, "I heard that butterflies are like spirit. Every butterfly carries the thoughts of the dead. I don't know if this one has them or not." After saying that, Haidasir reached out to touch the radiant goddess flash butterfly. Unexpectedly, it flew away from Luoqiu's shoulder and flew into the dim passage. Haidasir said with a regretful expression, "It seems it doesn't like me at all. I'm sorry, I scared your little pet away." Luoqiu smiled and said, "If fate wills it, we'll meet again." Chapter 877. Although the passageway seemed a little eerie and strange, the guests felt a sense of relief when they reached the end of the passageway. They didn't feel stuffy because they were deep underground. At the same time, the air wasn't turbid, even though candlelight was used to illuminate the place. The ventilation system here seemed to be quite good. Many oak barrels could be seen all around, and the aroma of red wine filled the air. The guests gathered in 2s and 3s, chatting about something. At this time, Zhong Luoyue had already dealt with a few waves of men who approached her because they saw her alone. At this time, a servant dressed in the manor's uniform brought in a cart a batch of unbranded red wine. There were about 30 bottles. After that, the other servants came out with the tools to open the wine and decanters. Not long after, the servants were like butterflies, weaving among the guests and serving them the freshly brewed wine. At this time, a servant walked towards Zhong Luoyue with a tray with a few glasses of red wine. But very soon, this servant was stopped by someone. It was Lady Eve. Lady Eve took 2 glasses from the servant's hand and smiled. The servant nodded and retreated. Lady Eve came to Zhong Luoyue's side and brought her a glass. Zhong Luoyue took it and thanked Madame Eve. Madame Eve giggled at this time, her breasts surging. The interaction between women seemed to start with compliments. At this time, Zhong Luoyue was admiring the necklace that Madame Evelyn was wearing. He said carefully, "If I'm not mistaken, this should be the Light of the Forest, made by the master jewelry maker, Pyre Phyllis, using 7 different kinds of emeralds. And the one in the middle is called the Eye of the Forest, right?" Lady Eve looked at Zhong Luoyue and said with a smile, "You seem to know a lot about jewelry." Zhong Luoyue also smiled and said, "It's normal for women to have some research on jewelry. When I was in school, I worked as a jewelry auctioneer for half a year, so I know a little more. Looks like I've finally found someone I can talk to." Lady Eve raised her glass at Zhong Luoyue. Zhong Luoyue was not unfamiliar with this kind of occasion to communicate with noble ladies. Her mannerisms were impeccable, and Lady Eve's smile grew wider and wider. "If I remember correctly, you have a male companion?" Lady Eve suddenly asked, "What about our god of gamblers' disciple?" Zhong Luoyue said calmly, "Just now, Mr. Tu asked someone to tell him that he had something to do, so he left. They should be here soon. Is Lady Eve looking for Ajay?" "It's nothing." Lady Eve shook her head. "I just didn't say hello to him when we were at the vineyard. I haven't seen that child for several years. I heard that he's doing well outside, so I wanted to hear about his wonderful life. After all, I'm his elder." "Lady Eve is so beautiful. You don't seem like an elder at all." Zhong Luoyue smiled and complimented, "I miss his sister more. Miss Zhong really knows how to talk." Lady Eve shook her head and said sadly, "I'm actually old. I can't even hide the wrinkles on my face. I can't compare to you young ladies." Zhong Luoyue said, "There's a kind of beauty that needs time to grow. Lady Eve's time is just right." Lady Eve pursed her lips and smiled, then suddenly said, "Do you want to take a closer look at it?" Light of the forest, I can take it off and let you take a closer look. Can I? Zhong Luoyue appeared to be tempted. However, she looked around and saw that they were surrounded by guests. Then, she shook her head. Lady Eve said, "Beautiful jewelry needs to be appreciated quietly. Besides, you are my soulmate. I am very happy to let you touch it. There is a quiet room next door. That place might be suitable for us. As long as we don't miss the opening of the legendary Forgotten River wine." Zhong Luoyue made an inviting gesture. Lady Eve gently pulled Zhong Luoyue's hand and said with a smile, "Trust me, you will be a lucky one." The voices gradually faded away. The place that Haidasir brought Luochio to was increasingly secluded. Truth be told, Haidasir gave Luochio the feeling that he was very familiar with the structure of this cellar. However, considering that this ancient castle was built by Haidasir's ancestor, Baron Fernandez, there was nothing strange about it. "Shouldn't we be going to the wine-tasting place?" Luochio suddenly asked. Haidasir said, "Don't worry, I have a better place. Besides, I don't want the environment here to ruin your mood. I want you to be able to remain relaxed and happy. You should also try your best to relax." "Relax?" Luochio asked curiously. "Do I look like I am nervous?" No. I am talking about a while." Haidasir said slowly. "Some vampires do not eat well, even losing their sense of beauty. Just think about it. For us, sucking blood is like eating. Say, in a high-class restaurant, when we are eating steak, someone would reach out to grab it and chew on it. Isn't that indecent?" Luochio nodded in agreement. He did not have any opinion on the different rules for different occasions. Paying attention to etiquette in a Western restaurant was a form of culture. Just like the setting off of firecrackers during traditional Chinese festivals, it was also a form of culture. There was no such thing as pretentious. Since eating is something that you need to pay attention to, why are there such rude fellows? Luochio asked curiously. As far as I know, the vampires described in the books are graceful. Each of them seems to have the blood of nobility flowing through their veins. Haidasir said, "We are always used to keeping good impressions. For example, in the human world, how many people praise the ancient emperors?" "Yes, that's right, vampires are indeed graceful. Their long lives give them enough time to learn and maintain some decaying rules to pass the time. However, this is relative to the type that has been around for a long time. In fact, there are many young vampires in today's society. They will not be too lenient. This is especially true for vampires who didn't evolve in the normal way. Abnormal way, besides the embrace, is there any other way for vampires to transform?" Haidasir nodded and said, "Yes, there is a witchcraft that can transform people into vampires. This strange witchcraft was created by a mixed blood. His father is a vampire and his mother is a witch. In the interracial union, this pair of lovers accidentally broke through the reproductive isolation and gave birth to a mixed blood. He inherited the abilities of vampires and also possesses powerful witchcraft." Luochio could not help but sigh and said, "There are so many wonderful things in the world." Haidasir agreed and said, "Yes, even for us, who have a long life, we will never know our own insignificance." Luochio was very good at getting clues from conversations. His heart skipped a beat and he said, "From what you said, could it be that in today's hunt there is a witchcraft transformation?" "My friend, your mind is sharp enough." Haidasir smiled and said, "There is, and you have already seen it." "Takizawa?" "Yes." Haidasir nodded and said, "Takizawa, including the entire family behind him, are all products of witchcraft transformation. Takizawa's ancestor was once the mixed blood's servant. When his ancestor was on his deathbed, due to his thirst for life, he asked his master to transform him into a vampire. Since then, a family of vampires outside of the traditional tradition was born." Luochio pondered and said, "It seems to me that you don't like the witchcraft transformation of vampires." Haidasir said, "That is because you have not seen Takizawa's true form. Ugly is no longer enough to describe them. They're like giant leeches and they're crazy about fresh blood. That's really a sight that's not very appetizing. Haidasir suddenly stopped. There was an exquisite door in front of him. Haidasir pushed open the door and entered. The room was very neatly arranged and the floor was covered with soft blankets. The luxurious decorations were in no way inferior to those of five-star hotel suite. Haidasir pointed to a large sofa and gestured for Luocio to sit down. As for Chen Xiaolian, he walked to the clothes rack at the side and took off his jacket. At the same time, he undid the top 2 buttons on his collar and rolled up his sleeve. If it is hot, it does not matter if I take it off. Luocio shook his head and said, I feel fine. Do you want to listen to some music? Haidasir asked in a soft voice. Luocio shook his head. At this moment, Haidasir slowly walked over, a wicked smile on his face. If one were to look carefully, one would discover that Haidasir's lips were purple in color, giving off a demonic feeling. He came to stand before Luocio and said softly, Do you know? We will not casually bare our fangs at humans because we are also very picky about food. We are not like the Takizawa family, who will eat anything when they are hungry. Of course, except for hunting days. He put his finger on Luocio's shoulder and moved it slowly. Basically, we will bring a blood servant with us. Of course, the blood servant's role is not only to provide us with fresh blood, but also to deal with many worldly chores for us. Therefore, the selection of blood servants is also very strict. Not only do they have to be excellent, but they must also be liked by us. A strange light flashed in Haidasir's eyes. At the same time, he moved his hand to Luocio's chin and gently lifted it. I really like you. Originally, I did not intend to find a blood servant today. Luocio, accept my love. Haidasir's eyes suddenly flashed with red light. When he opened his mouth slightly, 2 sharp teeth were exposed. He looked at the motionless Luocio and wanted to kiss his lip. No wonder I always felt that something was wrong. What, bang? In his astonishment, Haidasir only felt that his body was suddenly hit by a huge force. This force was so huge that he could not resist it at all. His whole body was sent flying and then directly crashed into the thick stone wall. His whole body even sank into the wall. A smear of red blood was spat out from Haidasir's mouth. He seemed to have suffered a serious internal injury. In fact, at the moment of impact, Haidasir could even hear that at least 8 bones in his body were broken. If it were not for the vampire's strong body, this would have killed him. However, instead of feeling fear, Haidasir showed another kind of fanatical expression. Oh, Luocio, I didn't expect you to have such a powerful force. I can't suppress my love. I really love you so much. When Luocio heard this, he only felt that his whole body was being tickled by ice-cold jelly. He let out a long sigh. It seems that my luck is starting to get bad. I didn't expect that the first one to come back would be disgust. Haidasir got off the wall at this time. He easily straightened his broken arm, tore open his shirt with one hand, and unbuttoned the rest of the buttons, revealing his pale chest. Luocio, you remind me of the druid 50 years ago. You're full of the pure breath of nature, always so elegant and intellectual. Haidasir showed an excited smile. I can't wait to press you under my body. Oh, this damn aristocratic etiquette, why do I still care about this now? I should hold you in my arms. Ah! Haidasir directly pounced on Luocio at this time. Luocio did not know any fighting skills, and he did not know what level of strength he had now. In the face of Haidasir's crazy pounce, he just instinctively waved his arm, not wanting to let this guy touch him again. Haidasir once again endured an unparalleled force, and his whole body fell to the ground. This time, he felt that more than half of his bones had been broken. Even with the vampire's super recovery ability, he could not recover in a short time. You. Who are you? Haidasir suddenly felt that he had made a big mistake. You are not an ordinary undying, disgust. Luocio glanced at Haidasir and muttered to himself, "Next is the impulse to destroy you. It seems that negative emotions are easier to wake up directly. I don't know if I will feel happy after killing you. Let's give it a try." This person. What is he talking about? Sidasir forced himself to raise his head, and what he saw was the other's ice-cold gaze. However, his expression was so natural. "Please wait a minute, you. Are you here for the true blood?" Haidasir spat out a mouthful of blood at this time, and only then did he finish his words. The invisible force pressing on him was getting stronger. He even felt that once he gave up this place, his body would be crushed into a pile of minced meat. True blood? What is that? Luocio's curiosity was aroused again. The murderous intent that had just surged out of him, which he wasn't particularly satisfied with, but it was real, disappeared in an instant. Yin 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 yin.